A lone Klingon girl fights for survival as alien ships ignore her desperate plea. The ESS Horizon sensors flicker to life, detecting a faint distress signal emanating from a remote moon. Captain Marcus Henry leans forward in his command chair, brow furrowed as he studies the readout. "Sir, it's a Klingon escape pod," First Officer Brian King reports, his voice tense. Life signs are weak and fading. Henry's jaw clenches. Earth Alliance protocols are clear. Avoid Klingon territory at all costs. But the captain's eyes never leave the pulsing dot on the screen, representing a life hanging by a thread. "Plot an intercept course," Henry orders, his decision made. "We're not leaving anyone to die out here." The horizon surges forward, crossing into disputed space. On the moon's cratered surface, the escape pod lies half buried in rocky soil. Inside, young Pia struggles to breathe, her body pinned beneath twisted metal. Blood trickles from a gash on her forehead as the pod's failing life support systems sputter and wheeze. King leads a shuttle to the surface, determination etched on his face. The rescue team's cutting torches spark against the pod's hull, filling the air with the acrid smell of burning metal. Pia's eyes flutter open at the sound, hope warring with fear in her gaze. As King pulls Pia from the wreckage, a massive shadow falls across the moon. A Klingon warship drops out of warp, weapons charged and locked on the horizon. General Koth's face fills the view screen, contorted with rage. "You dare trespass in Klingon space, humans?" He snarls. "Return our citizen immediately or face annihilation." Henry stands tall, refusing to back down. "We're conducting a rescue mission, General. Your own people ignored this distress call." Koth's response is a barrage of disruptor fire that rocks the horizon. Alarms blare as shields strain under the assault. In the shuttle bay, King cradles Pia's unconscious form as his team races aboard. The bay doors barely close before Henry orders an emergency warp jump. The horizon leaps away, leaving a furious Klingon warship in its wake. In the medical bay, doctors work feverishly to save Pia's life. King watches, his uniform stained with her blood, as the enormity of their action sinks in. They've rescued one life, but at what cost? As the horizon streaks through space, the consequences of their compassion loom large. Earth and the Klingon Empire stand on the brink of conflict, all because humanity couldn't ignore a cry for help. The horizon streaked through space, leaving a trail of ionized particles in its wake. Captain Henry stood at the helm, his fist clenched as he gripped the console. The ship shuddered, groaning under the strain of its emergency warp jump. Dropping out of warp in 3, 2, 1, the helmsman announced. The star field on the console blurred, then snapped back into focus as the horizon decelerated. They had emerged in neutral space, far from Klingon territory. "Damage report," Henry barked, his eyes scanning the flickering readouts. Chief Engineer Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comms. "Hull integrity at 62%, Captain. We've got multiple breaches on decks 3 through 7. Shields are down to 18%, and life support is failing on the lower decks." Henry's expression resolute. "Initiate immediate repairs. Priority on life support and shields." "Aye, sir," Rodriguez responded, the sound of sparking circuits audible in the background. In the medical bay, Dr. Morrison hunched over Pia's unconscious form, his brow furrowed in concentration. First Officer King stood nearby, his uniform still stained with the Klingon girl's blood. "How is she, Doctor?" King asked, his voice low. Morrison shook his head, not looking up from his work. "Critical but stable. Her physiology is challenging. I've never treated a Klingon before." The ship rocked suddenly, alarms blaring. King stumbled, catching himself on a nearby console. "Bridge to First Officer King." Henry's voice came through the comm system. King tapped his badge. "King here." Report to the briefing room immediately. We've got company. King cast one last glance at Pia before hurrying out of the medical bay. He arrived in the briefing room to find the senior staff already assembled, their faces grim. Captain Henry stood at the head of the table, a holographic display of the sector floating above its surface. Red dots blinked ominously, approaching their position. Long-range sensors had detected multiple Klingon warships entering the sector, Henry announced. They're searching for us, and in our current state, we can't outrun them. Chief Engineer Rodriguez leaned forward. Captain, there's a nebula about half a light-year from our position. We could use it to mask our energy signature. Buy us some time for repairs. Security Chief Hawkins frowned. The radiation from that nebula could fry what's left of our shields. We should consider alternative options. His gaze swept the room, like returning the Klingon girl. Absolutely not, King snapped, his fist clenching at his sides. Henry raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. We don't abandon those we've sworn to protect. Rodriguez, plot a course for that nebula. We'll take our chances with the radiation. As the staff filed out to their stations, the comm system crackled to life. Medical bay to Captain Henry. Sir, the Klingon patient is awake and asking to speak with you. Henry and King exchanged glances before hurrying to the turbolift. They arrived in the medical bay to find Pia propped up on a biobed, her dark eyes alert despite the pallor of her skin. Captain, she said, her voice rough, I owe you my life. Henry approached her bedside. We're glad you're awake. Can you tell us what happened? Why were you in that escape pod? Pia's expression hardened. I am Pia, daughter of Chancellor Cragg of the High Council. I was fleeing an arranged marriage to General Koff. The revelation hit Henry like a physical blow. He glanced at King, seeing his own shock mirrored in the first officer's face. The general whose ship attacked us, King said slowly. Pia nodded. My father. He does not know I fled. Koff would see me dead before allowing me to escape his grasp. Before Henry could respond, the ship lurched violently. Rodriguez's voice came over the comm. Captain, we've entered the nebula. Shield strength is dropping rapidly. Understood, Henry replied. He turned back to Pia. We'll continue this conversation later. For now, rest and recover. As they left the medical bay, King spoke in a low voice. Sir, this changes everything. We're harboring the daughter of the Klingon Chancellor. Henry's expression was grim, and we just painted a target on our backs for every faction in the Klingon Empire. The horizon shuddered as it pushed deeper into the nebula. On the bridge, the view screen showed a swirling mass of gases and radiation, occasional flashes of energy illuminating the cosmic cloud. Shield strength at 12% and falling, the tactical officer reported. Hull temperature rising. Henry stood from his chair, surveying his crew. Each face showed tenacity tinged with fear. They all knew the stakes. Reroute all non-essential power to the shields, he ordered. And get me a secure channel. It's time we reached out to Chancellor Cragg directly. As the communications officer worked to establish the connection, Henry stared out at the nebula engulfing them. They were out of options and nearly out of time. Whatever came next would shape not just their fate, but the future of human-Klingon relations. The universe held its breath, waiting to see if diplomacy could prevail where weapons had failed. The tension on the bridge was palpable as Captain Henry awaited a response to his transmission. Seconds stretched into minutes, each moment fraught with the possibility of detection by Klingon forces. Just as hope began to wane, the communications officer's console lit up. Captain, incoming transmission, she announced, her voice tinged with surprise. It's heavily encrypted, sir. Henry's heart raced. Source? Confirmed. Sir, it's from Chancellor Cragg himself. A collective breath of relief swept through the bridge. Henry nodded, his expression grave. Put it through to my ready room. As the door slid shut behind him, Henry activated the secure channel. Chancellor Craig's face materialized on the screen, his features etched with a mix of concern and hardly restrained anger. "Captain Henry," Cragg growled, "you have my daughter." Henry met the Klingon leader's gaze unflinchingly. "Chancellor, we rescued your daughter from certain death. She—" "I am aware of the circumstances," Cragg interrupted. "What I want to know is your intentions." "To return Pia safely and open a dialogue between our peoples," Henry replied firmly. Cragg's eyes narrowed, studying the human captain. After a tense moment, he spoke. "Very well. I propose a meeting on neutral ground, the planet Arcadia." Henry nodded, agreed. "But be warned, Captain," Cragg added, his voice low. "General Koth and his loyalists are unaware of this arrangement. They will continue their pursuit. If you are captured before reaching Arcadia, I cannot guarantee your safety or that of your crew." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Henry alone with the weight of this new information. He strode back onto the bridge, his mind racing with possibilities. "All senior staff to the briefing room," he ordered. Minutes later, the command crew assembled around the table, their faces a mix of anticipation and exhaustion. "We have a chance to end this," Henry began, outlining the communication with Chancellor Cragg and the proposed meeting on Arcadia. First Officer King leaned forward. "Sir, with all due respect, our ship is barely holding together. How do we expect to reach Arcadia with Koth's forces in pursuit?" Chief Engineer Rodriguez nodded in agreement. "The warp drive is pushed to its limits, Captain. We can't outrun them in our current state." Henry's gaze swept the room, settling on each of his officers in turn. "Then we don't run. We hide in plain sight." He tapped the control, bringing up a holographic display of their sector. "We'll exit the nebula on a trajectory towards Arcadia, but we'll use our damaged warp drive to our advantage." King's eyes widened as he grasped the plan. A series of short, erratic jumps. It'll be nearly impossible for them to predict our course. "Exactly," Henry confirmed. "Rodriguez, can you make it happen?" The chief engineer rubbed his chin, considering. "It'll be risky, Captain. Each jump will put immense strain on our systems. But it might just work." "Make it happen," Henry ordered. "We leave the nebula in 30 minutes. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Henry felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded a daring maneuver. The horizon might be battered, but her crew was far from beaten. 30 minutes later, the nebula's swirling gases parted as the horizon emerged, its hull scarred and systems flickering. Almost immediately, alarms blared across the bridge. "Klingon warship detected," the tactical officer shouted. "It's General Koth's vessel, closing fast." Henry's voice cut through the chaos. "Initiate jump sequence. Now." The ship lurched as it entered warp, only to drop out seconds later, kilometers from its previous position. The process repeated, each jump more violent than the last. In engineering, Rodriguez and his team worked feverishly, rerouting power and bypassing failing systems. "We're redlining the engines, Captain," he shouted over the comm. "I don't know how long we can keep this up." The medical bay was a scene of controlled chaos. Dr. Morrison struggled to keep Pia stable as the ship bucked and heaved around them. King braced himself against a bulkhead, helping to secure loose equipment. "Your ship," Pia gasped between jolts. "It cannot withstand this punishment for long." King managed a grim smile. "You'd be surprised what this old girl can handle." Another violent lurch sent them sprawling. As King helped Pia back onto the biobed, she gripped his arm. "There's something you must know," she said urgently. "Koth's faction. They seek to overthrow my father. If they succeed, it will mean war with your alliance." Before King could respond, the ship shuddered to a stop. Henry's voice came over the comm. All hands, brace for impact. Multiple Klingon vessels on intercept course. On the bridge, Security Chief Hawkins' fingers flew over his console. Sir, I'm reading several smaller Klingon ships. They're matching our jump pattern. Henry's mind raced, searching for options. Their erratic course had bought them time, but now they were being boxed in. He stared at the tactical display, watching as the hostile ships closed in from all sides. Suddenly, his eyes locked onto a pulsing icon near the edge of the screen. A Class 9 Pulsar. Its deadly radiation cascading across the sector. Helm, set course for that Pulsar, Henry ordered, his voice steady despite the risk. Full impulse. The navigator turned, his face pale. Sir, at this range, the radiation will mask our energy signature and potentially cripple our pursuers, Henry finished. It's our only chance. Do it. As the horizon altered course, hurtling towards the stellar death trap, Henry knew he was gambling with the lives of his entire crew. But with Koth's forces closing in and their ship falling apart around them, they were out of alternatives. The Pulsar loomed larger on the monitor, its deadly beauty both mesmerizing and terrifying. Henry gripped the arms of his chair, steeling himself for what was to come. All hands, he announced shipwide. Prepare for extreme radiation exposure. This is going to get rough. The horizon plunged towards the Pulsar, alarms blaring as radiation levels spiked. Behind them, the pursuing Klingon ships began to fall back, their commanders unwilling to risk such close proximity to the stellar phenomenon. As the ship shuddered under the Pulsar's assault, Henry silently prayed that their risky move would pay off. The race to Arcadia and the fate of Earth-Klingon relations now hinged on their ability to withstand the fury of a star. Star's deadly embrace. The horizon shuddered violently as it plunged deeper into the Pulsar's influence. Sparks erupted from consoles across the bridge, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Captain Henry gripped his chair, knuckles tightening, as he watched the radiation levels climb to dangerous heights on the main display. "Shields are down to 3%, shouted the tactical officer over the cacophony of alarms. Hull integrity failing. Henry's mind raced. They couldn't withstand this punishment much longer, but neither could their pursuers. He had to time their escape perfectly. "Helm, stand by for my mark," he ordered, eyes fixed on the sensors. The Klingon ships were falling back, their own systems faltering under the Pulsar's assault. Just a few more seconds. Now! Full impulse. Get us out of here. The Horizon's engines roared to life, propelling the battered vessel away from the Pulsar's deadly influence. Behind them, the Klingon ships struggled to regroup, their systems temporarily crippled by the radiation exposure. As they cleared the immediate danger, Henry allowed himself a moment of relief. But it was short-lived. "Captain," Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm, "the warp core is highly unstable. We can't risk another jump." Henry nodded grimly. "Understood. Set course for Arcadia, best possible speed." The Horizon limped towards its destination, its crew working tirelessly to keep the failing systems operational. Hours passed in a tense blur of emergency repairs and constant vigilance against their pursuers. Finally, the blue-green orb of Arcadia appeared on their long-range sensors. A collective sigh of relief swept through the bridge crew, but it was quickly stifled as another alert sounded. "Captain, I'm detecting a Klingon battlecruiser in orbit," reported the tactical officer. It's Chancellor Craig's ship, Sir the IKS Collis." Henry straightened in his chair. This was it, their chance for diplomacy, for peace. But before he could issue any orders, 3 signals appeared on the tactical display behind them. "Klingon birds of prey decloaking off our stern," shouted the tactical officer. "It's Koth's forces, The horizon rocked as disruptor fires slammed into their already weakened hull. Alarms blared, and emergency force fields flickered to life as multiple breaches opened across the ship's structure. Evasive maneuvers, Henry commanded, but he knew it was futile. The horizon was in no condition for a fight. With a heavy heart, he made the only decision he could. All hands, prepare for emergency landing. We're going down. The ship plunged into Arcadia's atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris. On the bridge, Henry and his crew fought to maintain control as the planet's surface rushed up to meet them. Structural integrity failing. Rodriguez's panicked voice came over the comm. "Captain, the warp core is going critical. We need to eject it now." Henry's expression resolute. "Do it." Moments later, a violent shudder ran through the ship as the warp core was jettisoned. It detonated in the upper atmosphere, temporarily blinding the sensors of the pursuing Klingon ships. Without its main power source, the horizon's descent became a barely controlled plummet. The ship skidded across a vast rocky plain, its hull screeching in protest as it tore along the ground. Fires erupted across multiple decks, and the air filled with the sounds of twisting metal and breaking glass. When the horizon finally ground to a halt, an eerie silence fell. Emergency systems sputtered to life, sealing off damaged sections and deploying fire suppression measures. Captain Henry pulled himself up from the floor, his uniform torn and smudged with soot. "Damage report," he croaked, helping his bridge officers to their feet. The reports flooded in, each more grim than the last. Multiple hull breaches, critical systems offline, and numerous injuries throughout the crew. The horizon was beyond repair. Henry made a quick decision. "First Officer King," he called out, "assemble a small team. Take Dr. Morrison and Pia. You need to make contact with Chancellor Cragg before Koff's forces find us." As King moved to comply, Security Chief Hawkins approached. "Sir, I'm detecting Klingon shuttles touching down several kilometers from our position." Henry nodded grimly. "Understood. We'll hold this position as long as we can. Buy King's team enough time to reach the Chancellor." He turned to King, who stood ready with Morrison and a weakened Pia. "Brian, the fate of Earth-Klingon relations may well rest on your shoulders. Find Cragg and make him understand. We can't afford a war." King nodded solemnly. "We won't let you down, sir." As the small team departed, disappearing into the alien landscape of Arcadia, Henry turned his attention to fortifying their position. He knew they couldn't hold out indefinitely against a Klingon assault, but they had to try. Outside the wreckage of the horizon, King's group moved swiftly across the rocky terrain. Dr. Morrison supported Pia, administering emergency treatment as they went. The harsh landscape of Arcadia stretched out before them, a mix of jagged rocks and dense, otherworldly vegetation. King pulled out a damaged tricorder, scanning for Klingon life signs. "I'm picking up faint readings to the north," he reported, "but there are multiple signatures closing in from the east. Koff's forces, most likely." Pia, her face pale but determined, spoke up. "We must hurry. If Koff reaches my father first, all will be lost." King nodded, his expression grim. They picked up their pace, racing against time and the approaching Klingon forces. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, and the next few hours would determine whether they faced a new era of peace or plunged into a devastating war. War. As the small team disappeared into the alien landscape of Arcadia, King's mind raced with the weight of their mission. The terrain was unforgiving, a jagged expanse of rocky outcroppings and dense, otherworldly vegetation. King led the way, his eyes constantly scanning for threats as they pushed forward. Dr. Morrison supported Pia, her medical tricorder humming softly as she monitored the Klingon princess's vital signs. "How's she holding up?" King asked, his voice low. Morrison's brow furrowed. "Stable for now. But we need to find shelter soon. Her injuries are severe. As they crested a hill, King raised a hand, signaling the group to halt. Before them stretched a wide, fast-flowing river, its dark waters churning over submerged rocks. The roar of the current filled the air, drowning out the distant sounds of Klingon search parties. "No way around," King muttered, pulling out his damaged tricorder. He scanned the area, hoping for a bridge or a ford, but the device only crackled with static. "We'll have to cross here." Ensign Alex Rodriguez, the team's engineer, stepped forward. "Sir, I have an idea. We could build a raft using some of this vegetation." King nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "Good thinking, Rodriguez. Let's get to work." The team sprang into action, gathering fallen tree-like plants and using the fibrous vines that snaked across the ground to lash them together. As they worked, Dr. Morrison tended to Pia's wounds, using the local flora to create improvised bandages and a paste with antiseptic properties. "Fascinating," Morrison murmured as she applied the paste to a gash on Pia's arm. "The plants here seem to have evolved potent medicinal properties." Pia winced but managed a weak smile. "Your Federation's scientific curiosity never ceases, even in dire circumstances." Their moment of calm was shattered by the high-pitched whine of a Klingon scout ship. King's head snapped up, spotting the vessel cresting the horizon. "Everyone on the raft now," he shouted, helping Morrison and Pia onto the makeshift craft. They pushed off into the swift current just as the Klingon ship opened fire. Energy blasts sizzled through the air, sending up plumes of steam where they struck the water. King found himself at the stern, using a long pole to guide their craft through the treacherous rapids. The raft bucked and heaved as it was battered by the current and the near misses from the Klingon weapon fire. Suddenly, a particularly violent jolt sent Ensign Rodriguez tumbling over the side. "Mon overboard!" Morrison yelled, clutching Pia to keep her from falling. Without hesitation, King dove into the turbulent waters. The cold shock of the river nearly drove the breath from his lungs, but he forced himself to focus, scanning the churning surface for any sign of Rodriguez. He caught a glimpse of the ensign's uniform disappearing beneath the foam and struck out with powerful strokes. King reached Rodriguez just as the young officer was about to go under again. He grabbed the ensign's collar and kicked hard, fighting against the current to keep them both afloat. The raft had pulled ahead, but he could see Dr. Morrison and Pia working together to steer it towards the shore. With a final burst of strength, King managed to drag himself and Rodriguez onto the opposite bank. They lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, as the others secured the raft and hurried to join them. As King struggled to his feet, his eyes were drawn to a strange structure partially hidden by the dense vegetation. Its architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen, with smooth, curved surfaces that seemed to defy gravity and strange symbols etched into its weathered exterior. "What is that?" Rodriguez asked, following King's gaze. "I'm not sure," King replied, "but it might offer a shelter and a defensible position. Let's check it out." The team approached the structure cautiously, King taking point with his phaser drawn. As they entered through a gap in the wall, they found themselves in a maze of corridors lined with dormant alien technology. The air inside was cool and still, a stark contrast to the humid jungle outside. They made their way deeper into the facility, eventually stumbling upon what appeared to be a central control room. Pia, despite her weakened state, perked up at the sight of the symbols covering the walls. "I recognize some of these," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "They're similar to glyphs found in ancient Klingon texts. This could be an outpost of the progenitors, a race said to have influenced both our cultures." As if responding to their presence, the room suddenly hummed to life. Holographic interfaces materialized around them, displaying star charts and streams of data in an unknown language. "Incredible," Dr. Morrison breathed, reaching out to touch one of the displays. "It seems our presence has reactivated the outpost systems." Before they could fully process this development, an alarm sounded from King's tricorder. He quickly checked the readout, his expression grim. "Multiple Klingon vessels converging on our position," he reported. "We're out of time." King surveyed the room, weighing their options. The ancient technology surrounding them could be their salvation or their doom. "Morrison, Rodriguez, work with Pia," he ordered. "See if you can decipher these controls. There might be a way to use this place to our advantage." He turned to the remaining team members. "The rest of you with me. We need to fortify our position." As they moved to carry out his orders, King felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. They were stranded in an alien structure, pursued by hostile forces, with the fate of two civilizations hanging in the balance. But as he watched his team work, adapting to each new challenge, he felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Whatever came next, they would face it head-on. King's persistence hardened as he surveyed the ancient control room, its alien technology humming with newfound life. The respite was short-lived, however, as the facility shuddered violently, dust cascading from the ceiling. "Klingon assault incoming," Ensign Rodriguez shouted, his eyes fixed on a holographic display showing multiple red dots converging on their position. King's mind raced, evaluating their options. "Dr. Morrison, keep working with Pia on that communication array. It's our best shot at reaching Chancellor Cragg." He turned to the rest of the team. "The rest of you with me. We need to fortify our defenses." As they moved to carry out his orders, King positioned the remaining team members at strategic points throughout the structure. The alien architecture, with its smooth curves and unusual angles, provided unexpected cover and vantage points. "Use the terrain to your advantage," King instructed, crouching behind a console that overlooked the main entrance. "Conserve your phaser power. We don't know how long we'll need to hold out." The first wave of Klingon attackers breached the outer perimeter, their battle cries echoing through the ancient halls. King watched in dismay as portable energy shield generators sprang to life, creating a protective bubble around the advancing force. "Sir, our phasers aren't penetrating their shields," Ensign Sarah Henry called out, her voice tinged with frustration. King gritted his teeth. "Fall back to secondary positions. We need to buy more time." He tapped his communicator. "Morrison, status report?" "We're making progress, but it's slow going," the doctor's voice crackled over the comm. "This technology is like nothing we've ever seen." Klingon disruptor fire intensified, chipping away at their cover. King knew they were running out of options. "Everyone spread out in search for anything we can use. There has to be some kind of defensive system in this place." The team scattered, ducking and weaving through corridors as they frantically searched for anything that might turn the tide. King himself darted from room to room, his eyes scanning for anything that looked remotely like a weapon. Suddenly, Ensign Henry's voice rang out. "Commander, I've found something." King sprinted toward her location, finding her in a hidden chamber filled with sleek, otherworldly devices. They hummed with latent energy, their surfaces adorned with the same strange symbols they'd seen throughout the facility. "What are they?" Henry asked, her hand hovering over one of the devices. King hesitated for a split second before making his decision. "Whatever they are, they're our only hope. Grab as many as you can carry. We'll figure out how to use them on the fly." They distributed the alien weapons among the team, their unfamiliar weight a mix of excitement and trepidation. As another tremor shook the facility, King raised his device and nodded to the others. "Let's give our Klingon friends a surprise." The team took up defensive positions once more, this time armed with the unknown alien technology. As the Klingon forces pushed deeper into the facility, King took aim and activated his weapon. A brilliant pulse of energy erupted from the device, striking the nearest Klingon shield generator. To everyone's amazement, the beam passed through the energy barrier as if it weren't there, overloading the generator in a shower of sparks. "It works!" King shouted, a grim smile crossing his face. "Concentrate fire on their shield generators." The tide of battle shifted dramatically. The human defenders, now armed with weapons that bypass Klingon defenses, forced the attackers to fall back and regroup. The sudden reversal bought precious time for the team working on the communication array. In the control room, Pia's eyes lit up as she deciphered a crucial section of alien text. "I've got it!" she exclaimed, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. "The communication array is online, but—" Her expression fell. "What is it?" Dr. Morrison asked, looking up from her work. Pia shook her head. "It needs more power. Much more than it's currently drawing." Morrison's gaze swept the room, landing on a pulsing column of energy in the corner. "That geothermal tap," she mused. "If we reroute the power from there, it might be enough." "But that could destabilize the entire structure," Rodriguez warned, his face pale. King's voice came over the comm, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. "Do it. It's our only shot." With a shared look of purpose, the trio set to work. As they redirected the facility's power, the structure began to groan and shake. Alarms blared, and systems throughout the complex started to fail. Pia worked feverishly, her fingers flying over the alien controls as she established a link with the IKS Colossus in orbit. The holographic display flickered, and suddenly the imposing visage of Chancellor Cragg filled the room. "Father!" Pia cried out, relief and urgency mingling in her voice. "Listen to me. We don't have much time." As Pia quickly explained the situation, the facility shuddered more violently. King's voice cut through the chaos. "We need to evacuate now. This place is coming down around us." The team scrambled to gather what they could, supporting the injured as they navigated the collapsing corridors. They emerged into chaos, the battlefield now a confused melee of Klingon factions as Chancellor Cragg's loyalists engaged Kess forces. A Klingon shuttle touched down nearby, and Chancellor Cragg himself stepped out, his eyes searching frantically until they landed on Pia. Their reunion was cut short as a familiar voice roared in defiance. For the Empire, General Koth charged forward, his disruptor aimed squarely at Pia and her father. Without hesitation, King threw himself into the line of fire. The disruptor blast caught him square in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground as Cragg's honor guard subdued the rogue general. As King lay on the ground, his vision blurring, he saw Pia kneeling beside him, tears in her eyes. Chancellor Cragg barked orders, calling for immediate medical attention. Human and Klingon medics rushed to King's side, working in an unprecedented display of cooperation. The last thing King saw before losing consciousness was Chancellor Cragg looking down at him, a mixture of gratitude and respect in the Klingon leader's eyes. As darkness claimed him, King couldn't help but wonder if this moment might be the beginning of a new chapter in human-Klingon relations. The world faded to black as King slipped into unconsciousness. Chancellor Cragg's voice boomed across the chaotic battlefield. "Cease fire. All forces, stand down immediately." The sound of disruptor fire gradually died away as both loyalist and rebel Klingon lowered their weapons, confusion evident on their faces. Cragg knelt beside King's prone form, his expression a mix of concern and grudging respect. "This human has shown great honor," he growled. "He will receive our finest medical care." The Chancellor tapped his communicator. "Colossus, emergency medical transport. Lock onto my signal and these human life signs." Within moments, a Klingon medical shuttle swooped down from the sky, kicking up swirls of dust as it landed. A team of Klingon medics rushed out, their movements precise and efficient as they secured King onto a hover stretcher. Pia stumbled forward, her face pale but determined. "I'm going with him," she declared, her voice leaving no room for argument. Chancellor Cragg nodded his assent, and she climbed aboard the shuttle alongside King's unconscious form. As the medical shuttle lifted off, heading for the IKS Colossus in orbit, Chancellor Cragg turned to address the assembled Klingon and humans. "Today, we stand at a crossroads," he announced, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "The treachery of General Koth and his co-conspirators has been exposed, but from this chaos, we have a chance to forge a new path." Cragg activated his communicator once more. "Open a channel to Earth Alliance Command," he ordered. The gathered crowd watched in stunned silence as the Chancellor began to speak. "This is Chancellor Cragg of the Klingon Empire. I wish to discuss an immediate cessation of hostilities and the possibility of peace talks between our peoples." On the ground, Captain Marcus Henry emerged from the wreckage of the ESS Horizon, his uniform torn and dirty, but his bearing still proud. He approached Chancellor Cragg cautiously, eyeing the Klingon leader with a mixture of wariness and hope. "Captain," Cragg acknowledged him, "your crew has fought with honor and courage. I propose we combine our efforts to salvage what we can from your ship and secure this area." Henry hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Agreed, Chancellor. I'll instruct my people to cooperate fully." He turned to his crew, who had gathered nearby. "All hands, work with the Klingon teams. Let's see what we can salvage from the horizon." As human and Klingon engineers began to work side by side, an unlikely camaraderie began to form. Lieutenant Sarah Chun, the Horizon's chief engineer, found herself grudgingly impressed by the ingenuity of her Klingon counterparts as they worked to bypass damaged systems and recover critical data cores. "Your shield harmonics are quite impressive," a gruff Klingon engineer commented as they extracted a partially melted power relay. "They held up well against our disruptors." Chun allowed herself a small smile. "Thanks. Your weapons pack quite a punch, too. Maybe we can exchange some notes when this is all over." Meanwhile, aboard the IKS Colossus, King was rushed into the medical bay. Dr. James Morrison, who had been transported up earlier, stood ready alongside a team of Klingon physicians. The stark difference between human and Klingon medical practices became immediately apparent as they began to work on King's injuries. "We need to stabilize his cellular integrity," a Klingon doctor barked. "Prepare the metabolic enhancer." Morrison's eyes widened. "Wait! Human physiology can't handle that level of stimulation. We need to modify the dosage." He quickly explained the intricacies of human biology, and together, they devised a treatment plan that merged the best of both medical traditions. Hours passed as they fought to save King's life. Pia remained by his side, her hand resting gently on his arm as if lending him her strength. Finally, Morrison stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow. "He's stabilized," he announced. "It was touch and go for a while, but I think he's going to make it." Pia sagged with relief, tears welling in her eyes. She looked up as her father entered the medical bay, his imposing figure softened by the concern on his face. "How is he?" Chancellor Cragg asked. "He'll live," Morrison replied. "But he's not out of the woods yet. He'll need time to recover." Cragg nodded solemnly. "He will have it. But now, we must prepare for what comes next." He turned to Pia. "Daughter, I need your help. We are about to embark on a journey that will change the course of both our peoples." As King lay unconscious, his chest rising and falling steadily, the wheels of diplomacy began to turn. Chancellor Cragg made his way to the bridge of the IKS Colossus, where a secure communication channel had been established with Earth Alliance leadership. "Members of the Earth Alliance Council," Cragg began, his voice resonating with authority. "The events on Arcadia have opened our eyes to the possibility of peace between our peoples. I extend an invitation to send a diplomatic delegation to Kess, the heart of the Klingon Empire, to begin formal negotiations." The council members on the other end of the transmission exchanged looks of shock and disbelief. After a moment of tense silence, a woman stepped forward. "Chancellor Cragg, I am Ambassador Elena Rodriguez. On behalf of the Earth Alliance, we accept your invitation. We will assemble a delegation immediately." As the transmission ended, Cragg turned to his advisors. "Prepare for their arrival. The future of the Empire now hangs in the balance." Back in the medical bay, King's eyes fluttered open. He found himself staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, the harsh lighting and guttural sounds of Klingon speech confirming he was no longer on Arcadia. As his vision cleared, he saw Pia sitting beside him, her face lighting up as she noticed his return to consciousness. "Welcome back, Commander," she said softly. "You've got impeccable timing. It seems we're about to make history." "History? It seems we're about to make a breakthrough in human-Klingon relations," Pia explained, her eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and concern. King attempted to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his chest. "Easy there, Commander," Dr. Morrison cautioned, gently easing him back onto the medical bed. "You've been through quite an ordeal." As King's vision cleared, he took in his surroundings. The Klingon medical bay was a stark contrast to the sterile white environments he was accustomed to. Ornate metalwork adorned the walls, and the air hummed with the sound of unfamiliar medical equipment. "What's our status?" King asked, his voice hoarse. Pia quickly brought him up to speed on the recent developments, including her father's invitation to Earth for peace talks. As she spoke, the door to the medical bay slid open with a metallic hiss, revealing Captain Marcus Henry. "Commander," Henry nodded, approaching King's bedside. "Glad to see you're awake. We've received new orders from Earth Alliance Command. The Horizon surviving crew is being recalled to Earth." King's eyebrows furrowed. "Recalled? What for?" "We're joining a diplomatic mission to Kess," Henry explained, his tone a mix of disbelief and purpose. "Our experience with the Klingon and that alien tech on Arcadia is apparently crucial for the negotiations." As King absorbed this information, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Chancellor Cragg's voice boomed over the intercom system. "All hands, battle stations. We have multiple hostiles on approach." The medical bay erupted into a flurry of activity. Dr. Morrison and the Klingon medical staff quickly secured equipment and prepared for potential casualties. Captain Henry tapped his communicator. "Bridge, this is Henry. What's our situation?" A gruff Klingon voice responded. "Captain, long-range sensors have detected several unidentified vessels near the border of our space. Their movement patterns suggest a possible ambush." Henry's eyes hardened. "Understood. I'm on my way to the bridge." He turned to King. "Commander, stay here and focus on your recovery. We may need you before this is over." As Henry rushed out, King struggled to sit up once more. "Pia," he called, "I need to know what's happening out there." Pia nodded, quickly accessing a nearby console. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a tactical map of the surrounding space. Multiple red dots blinked ominously along their projected course to Kess. "This doesn't look good," King muttered, studying the display intently. "Those ships are perfectly positioned for an ambush." On the bridge of the IKS Collis, Captain Henry joined Chancellor Cragg, who was barking orders to his crew. "Alert Earth Alliance Command," Cragg commanded. "Inform them of the situation and request immediate assistance." Henry stepped forward. "Chancellor, if I may suggest, we should consider altering our course. I have experience evading Klingon pursuit. Perhaps we could use similar tactics here." Cragg turned to Henry, his eyes narrowing as he considered the human's words. After a moment, he nodded. "Very well, Captain. Show us what you can do." As Henry began outlining his plan to the Klingon navigation officer, a new alert sounded. "Chancellor," a Klingon officer called out. "The Earth Alliance vessel, AS Peacemaker, has just entered the system. They're on a direct course for the ambush coordinates." Cragg's expression darkened. Open a channel to the Peacemaker, he ordered. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing the bridge of the Earth vessel. An older human woman with silver hair and a stern expression appeared on screen. "This is Ambassador Elena Rodriguez of the AS Peacemaker," she announced. "We're en route to Kess for the peace talks." "Ambassador," Cragg replied urgently, "you are heading into a trap. There are hostile vessels lying in wait along your current trajectory." Rodriguez's eyes widened slightly, but her composure remained steady. "Understood, Chancellor. What do you suggest?" Before Cragg could respond, the tactical display erupted with new contacts. The hidden vessels decloaked, revealing a mix of rogue Klingon warships and various mercenary vessels. They immediately opened fire on both the Colossus and the Peacemaker. "Evasive maneuvers," Cragg roared, as the ship rocked from the initial barrage. "Deploy our escort ships and return fire." On the Peacemaker, Ambassador Rodriguez gripped her command chair as the ship shuddered under the assault. "Activate all defensive systems," she ordered. "And get me a secure channel to Earth Alliance Command. They need to know what's happening here." As the space around them erupted into chaos, the crew of both ships fought desperately to break through the ambush. The Peacemaker's advanced defensive systems held firm against the initial wave of attacks, while the Klingon escort ships engaged in fierce close-quarters combat with the rogue forces. In the medical bay of the Colossus, King watched the battle unfold on the holographic display with growing concern. He turned to Pia, his expression grim. "We need to get to the bridge. There might be something we can do to help." Pia hesitated, glancing at King's injuries. "Are you sure you're up for this?" King nodded, slowly rising to his feet. "We don't have a choice. The fate of human-Klingon relations is hanging in the balance. We can't afford to sit this one out." As they made their way towards the bridge, the ship rocked violently from another hit. Klaxons blared, and Klingon crew members rushed past them, heading to their battle stations. King and Pia exchanged a determined look, knowing that the next few moments could change the course of history for both their peoples. The battle raged on, with both sides taking heavy damage. As they reached the bridge, King and Pia saw Chancellor Cragg and Captain Henry working side by side, coordinating the defense of both ships. The view screen showed the Peacemaker taking a direct hit to its engine systems, causing a cascade of failures across the ship. "Chancellor," King called out as he entered the bridge, "we need to find a way to get the Peacemaker out of here. If we lose that ship, we lose any chance of peace between our people." Cragg turned to King, his expression a mix of surprise and respect. "You should be resting, Commander. But since you're here, what do you propose?" As King began to outline his plan, the battle around them intensified. The fate of the peace talks, and possibly the future of human-Klingon relations, now rested on their ability to overcome this unexpected and deadly obstacle. Challenge. As the battle raged around them, King's mind raced, searching for a solution that could turn the tide. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "Chancellor," he said, his voice firm despite his weakened state, "I need to get to the Peacemaker. I think I can help." Cragg's eyes narrowed, assessing the human's grit. After a moment he nodded. "Very well, Commander. But how do you propose to reach them in the middle of this chaos?" "I'll take him," Pia volunteered, stepping forward. "I can pilot a shuttle through the battlefield." With Cragg's approval, King and Pia rushed to the hangar bay. As they boarded a small Klingon shuttle, King felt a twinge of pain in his chest, reminding him of his recent injuries. He pushed the discomfort aside, focusing on the task ahead. Pia skillfully maneuvered the shuttle through the chaos of battle, dodging weapons fire and debris. As they approached the Peacemaker, they saw the extent of the damage. The Earth Alliance ship's engines were sputtering, barely keeping it in the fight. Upon docking with the Peacemaker, King and Pia were met by a security team led by Chief Michael Hawkins. "Commander King?" Hawkins asked, surprised. What are you doing here? No time to explain, King replied, already moving towards engineering. I need to see your chief engineer immediately. In engineering, they found Commander Sarah Henry frantically working to keep the ship's systems online. She looked up as King entered, her expression a mix of confusion and hope. Commander King, I heard you were injured on Arcadia. King nodded, moving to join her at the main console. I was, but that's not important right now. We need to get your engines back online, and I think I know how. He quickly explained his idea to use the alien technology from Arcadia to boost the ship's power systems. Commander Henry's eyes widened as she grasped the implications. That's incredibly risky, she said, but at this point, we're out of options. Let's do it. As they worked to integrate the alien tech into the Peacemaker systems, the ship rocked from another hit. King stumbled, nearly falling, but Pia caught him, helping him regain his balance. On the bridge, Captain Marcus Henry was coordinating with the Klingon escort ships. We need to conserve what little power we have left, he said over the comm. Position your ships on either side of us. We'll use your shields to create a protective bubble while we complete the repairs. The Klingon captains acknowledged the order, maneuvering their ships into position. The combined shields created a shimmering barrier around the Peacemaker, allowing it a brief respite from the onslaught. Back in engineering, King and Commander Henry were making the final connections. The ship systems began to fluctuate wildly as they initiated the power transfer. We're losing containment, Commander Henry shouted over the sound of alarms blaring throughout engineering. King's hands flew over the controls, his mind racing back to his experiences on Arcadia. He made a series of rapid adjustments, drawing on his intimate knowledge of the alien technology. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the gamble would fail. The lights in engineering flickered, and the deck plates vibrated ominously beneath their feet. Then, suddenly, the ship surged with new life. The Peacemaker's engines roared back to life, pulsing with more power than ever before. The weapon systems came online, their energy readings off the charts. We did it, Commander Henry exclaimed, her face lighting up with relief and excitement. On the bridge, Captain Henry felt the ship respond to his commands with newfound vigor. Status report, he called out. Sir, our power levels are at 150% of normal capacity, his tactical officer reported, awe evident in his voice. Weapons are online and showing unprecedented penetration capabilities. A grim smile spread across Captain Henry's face. Then let's put them to use. Target the lead ships of the enemy fleet. Fire at will. The Peacemaker's weapons lanced out, cutting through the shields of the rogue vessels with ease. The tide of battle began to turn as the Earth Alliance ship, now powered by a fusion of human and ancient alien technology, took the fight to their attackers. As the Peacemaker and its Klingon allies pushed back against the rogue fleet, a new threat emerged. General Morikiu, seeing his ambush failing, decided to take matters into his own hands. Sir, the tactical officer called out, we're detecting multiple transporter signatures throughout the ship. We're being boarded. Captain Henry's expression hardened. Security teams to all decks. Repel boarders. In engineering, King heard the alert. Despite his exhaustion, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. Commander Henry, can you handle things here? He asked. She nodded, already focused on maintaining the delicate balance of their new power systems. Go. We've got this covered. King made his way through the corridors, joining up with Security Chief Hawkins and his team. The sounds of disruptor fire and hand-to-hand combat echoed through the ship. They're making a push for the bridge, Hawkins informed him as they moved. We need to cut them off. King nodded, his mind racing. I've been studying Klingon combat techniques. If we can anticipate their moves, we might be able to outmaneuver them. As they encountered groups of Klingon warriors, King's insights proved invaluable. He guided Hawkins and his team, helping them counter the Klingon aggressive tactics with precision and efficiency. Despite their efforts, however, a group of elite Klingon guards, led by General Moriku himself, managed to fight their way to the bridge. As they prepared to breach the final security door, Captain Henry and Ambassador Rodriguez braced themselves for what could be their last stand. The door exploded inward, and Moriku stepped through the smoke, his bat'leth gleaming in the harsh light of the bridge. "Your journey ends here, humans," he growled, his eyes fixed on Ambassador Rodriguez. But before he could take another step, a familiar voice rang out. "I think not, Moriku." Chancellor Cragg materialized on the bridge, flanked by a team of loyal Klingon warriors. He stood tall, his own bat'leth at the ready. "Chancellor," Moriku spat, his voice dripping with contempt, "you would side with these humans against your own people?" Cragg's eyes narrowed. "I side with honor, Moriku. Something you seem to have forgotten." With a roar, Moriku charged at Cragg. The two Klingon leaders met in a clash of steel, their bat'leths ringing out as they dueled in the center of the bridge. The humans and other Klingon watched in awe as the two warriors fought, their movements a blur of skill and strength. Despite Moriku's ferocity, Cragg's righteous purpose seemed to lend him an edge. In a final, decisive move, Cragg disarmed Moriku, sending the rogue general's bat'leth clattering to the deck. Moriku fell to his knees, defeated but defiant. "It's over, Moriku," Cragg said, his voice heavy with the weight of victory and responsibility. "You and your followers will answer for your actions." As Moriku and his remaining forces were taken into custody, the immediate threat neutralized, a sense of cautious relief spread through the peacemaker. The ship, battered but unbroken, resumed its course to Kess alongside its Klingon escorts. King made his way back to the bridge, his body aching but his spirit buoyed by their success. As he stepped onto the command deck, he saw Captain Henry, Ambassador Rodriguez, and Chancellor Cragg standing together, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and hope. "Commander King," Captain Henry said, nodding in acknowledgement, "it seems we owe you our thanks once again." King shook his head. It was a team effort, Sir Human and Klingon alike. As the Peacemaker approached Kess, its hull bearing the scars of battle, but its crew united in purpose, King realized that their ordeal had done more than just save the peace talks. It had forged a bond between humans and Klingon that ran deeper than any treaty could express. The challenges ahead were still daunting, but as King looked at the diverse group on the bridge, human, Klingon, and those like Pia who bridged both worlds, he felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The Peacemaker entered orbit around Kess, its arrival a testament to the potential for cooperation between two once bitter enemies. As they prepared to disembark and begin the formal peace negotiations, King knew that their journey was a long way to go. But for the first time since this crisis began, he allowed himself to believe that a lasting peace might truly be within their grasp. Reach. As the Peacemakers settled into orbit around Kess, the stark reality of their situation set in. The true test of their newfound alliance was about to begin on the surface of the Klingon homeworld. Chancellor Cragg turned to Captain Henry and First Officer King, his expression a mixture of anticipation and concern. "You must accompany me to the surface," he declared. "Your presence will be crucial in demonstrating the strength of our alliance to the High Council." Captain Henry nodded, but his eyes darted to King, who was still visibly weakened from his injuries. "Chancellor, I'm not sure if Commander King is dash." "I'm going," King interrupted, his voice firm despite his pallor. "I've come this far. I won't back down now." Dr. Morrison, overhearing the exchange, stepped forward with a small device in hand. "If you insist on going, Commander, at least take this," she said, attaching the portable medical monitor to King's wrist. "It'll keep track of your vitals and alert me if there's any cause for concern." As the landing party assembled, tension filled the air. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez joined them, her diplomatic training evident in her composed demeanor. General Koth, now in restraints, was brought along as well, a living testament to the failure of those who oppose peace. The descent to Konoes in the Klingon shuttle was marked by an uneasy silence. As they broke through the planet's atmosphere, the capital city came into view, a sprawling metropolis of imposing architecture that seemed to reflect the Klingon spirit itself. King pressed his face to the viewport, taking in the alien landscape. The streets below were filled with Klingon, their faces turned upward, watching the shuttle's approach. "Looks like we've drawn quite a crowd," he murmured. Captain Henry nodded grimly. "Let's hope it's a welcoming committee and not a lynch mob." As the shuttle touched down, they were immediately surrounded by a phalanx of Klingon warriors, led by a battle-scarred veteran. Chancellor Cragg stepped forward, his head held high. "General Martok," he greeted the leader, "I present to you our Earth allies." Martok's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the humans. His gaze lingered on King, noting the officer's weakened state with a mixture of curiosity and something that might have been respect. "Chancellor," he rumbled, "the High Council demands an immediate audience. The presence of humans on our sacred world has stirred up certain factions." As they made their way through the streets, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Crowds pressed in on all sides, their reactions ranging from wide-eyed curiosity to open hostility. A group of Klingon citizens began hurling debris and insults at the procession. "Weaklings," one Klingon roared, his face contorted with rage. "You dishonor us by bringing these humans here." Captain Henry maintained his composure, his back straight and his gaze fixed ahead. King noticed several Klingon warriors watching the captain with grudging admiration for his stoicism in the face of the onslaught. The great hall of the High Council loomed before them, its massive doors swinging open to reveal a chamber filled with the most powerful Klingon in the Empire. The room fell silent as Chancellor Cragg led the Earth delegation inside. "Honored members of the High Council," Cragg began, his voice echoing through the hall, "I present to you First Officer Brian King and Captain Marcus Henry of the Earth Alliance." Before Cragg could continue, a voice rang out from the assembly. "This is an outrage." Counselor Kun, brother of Worf, stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You bring these humans to our most sacred chambers without proof of their worth? I demand they face the rite of ascension." The chamber erupted into chaos, with counselors shouting their agreement or dissent. Ambassador Rodriguez attempted to interject, her voice barely audible above the din. "Honored Council, surely we can purpose this through diplomatic means dash." Her words were drowned out by the clamor of Klingon voices. King felt his heart racing, the medical monitor on his wrist beeping softly in warning. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Captain Henry stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "I accept your challenge," he declared, silencing the room. "If it is through combat that we must prove our worth, then so be it." King moved to stand beside his captain, ignoring the protest of his aching body. "As do I," he added, meeting King's gaze unflinchingly. Dr. Morrison pushed through the crowd, her face pale with worry. "Commander, you can't possibly dash." "I must," King interrupted, his voice low but firm. He turned to Chancellor Cragg. "We accept the trial, but request that it be modified to account for my current condition." Cragg nodded, a gleam of approval in his eyes. He faced the council, his voice ringing with authority. "Let it be so. Captain Henry and First Officer King will face a modified version of the rite of ascension. They will be tested in combat, survival, and mental fortitude. Should they prevail, let no Klingon question their honor or their right to stand among us as allies." As the council reluctantly agreed to the terms, King felt a mix of anticipation and dread settle in his stomach. He glanced at Captain Henry, seeing his own commitment reflected in the other man's eyes. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together for the sake of their people and the promise of peace. In the tense silence that followed, King realized that their journey had taken an unexpected turn. The fate of their mission, and perhaps the future of human-Klingon relations, now rested on their ability to prove themselves worthy in the eyes of their Klingon hosts. As preparations for the trials began, King steeled himself for the battles to come, knowing that the true test of their purpose was only just beginning. As the preparations for the modified rite of ascension began, King and Henry found themselves thrust into an intensive crash course on Klingon combat techniques and cultural expectations. The Klingon trainers, initially dismissive of the humans, watched with growing interest as King and Henry absorbed the lessons with surprising speed. Despite his injuries, King pushed himself relentlessly, his purpose evident in every grimace and bead of sweat. During a particularly grueling session, the Klingon instructor Kvok barked out, "Again! Show me the Makbara stance." King, his muscles screaming in protest, moved through the complex series of movements. Kvok's eyes narrowed, a grunt of reluctant approval escaping his lips. "You learn quickly for a human," he said, circling King. "Perhaps you are not as soft as we thought." Meanwhile, aboard the EAS Peacemaker, Chief Engineer Sarah Henry was making a breakthrough that would change everything. Her hands flew over the console as she analyzed the alien technology integrated into the ship systems. "Captain," she called over the comm, excitement evident in her voice, "I've discovered something incredible. This technology, it can enhance physical attributes when in proximity to organic matter. I think I can use it to help King and Henry in their trials." As Sarah worked tirelessly to modify their communicators, King and Henry continued their preparations on the planet's surface. The day of the trials arrived with a palpable sense of anticipation. The arena in the heart of the Klingon capital buzzed with the energy of thousands of spectators. King and Henry stood at the entrance, their modified communicators disguised as traditional Klingon armor accessories. "Ready?" Henry asked, his voice low. King nodded, his fists tight. "As I'll ever be." They stepped into the arena, the roar of the crowd washing over them. The High Council members sat in their elevated platform, Chancellor Cragg at the center, flanked by General Martok and the scowling Counselor Kun. The first trial began without ceremony. King found himself face-to-face with Korg, a battle-scarred Klingon warrior. As Korg charged, King felt a surge of strength flow through him, courtesy of Sarah's modifications. King sidestepped Korg's initial attack, countering with a move he had learned in training. The Klingon's eyes widened in surprise as King's strike connected with more force than expected. Nearby, Henry grappled with Tok, a younger but equally fierce opponent. The human captain uses enhanced reflexes to avoid Tok's wild swings, retaliating with precisely timed strikes. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the humans held their own against the Klingon warriors. King, drawing on his recent training, executed a complex series of moves that left Korg off balance. With a final, decisive strike, King sent the Klingon crashing to the ground. Henry, utilizing a combination of strength and strategy, managed to outmaneuver Tok. In a move that drew gasps from the audience, he used Tok's own momentum against him, flipping the Klingon over his shoulder and pinning him to the ground. As the dust settled, the arena erupted in a mixture of cheers and confused murmurs. Chancellor Cragg leaned forward, a glimmer of satisfaction in his eyes. Counselor Kun's scowl deepened. With barely a moment to catch their breath, King and Henry were ushered towards the entrance of the caves of Kalas. The yawning mouth of the cave system loomed before them, promising untold dangers. "Remember," Henry muttered as they stepped into the darkness, "we're looking for the artifact. Stay alert." Their communicators hummed softly, enhancing their senses as they navigated the treacherous passages. The air grew thick with the stench of sulfur, and in the distance, they could hear the hiss of Klingon cave serpents. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with one of the venomous creatures. Its scales gleamed in the dim light, its forked tongue flicking out menacingly. King reacted instinctively, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge the serpent's initial strike. Henry, seizing the opportunity, used a nearby stalagmite to pin the creature to the ground. "Nice move," King panted, his heart racing. They pressed on, their path taking them across a narrow stone bridge spanning a pit of bubbling lava. The heat was oppressive, sweat pouring down their faces as they inched their way across. Suddenly, the bridge began to crumble. King and Henry broke into a sprint, their enhanced strength propelling them forward as the stone disintegrated behind them. They leapt the final few feet, landing hard on the other side as the last of the bridge collapsed into the molten rock below. Catching their breath, they exchanged a look of unyielding commitment. The real challenges, they knew, were yet to come. As they pushed deeper into the caves, the weight of their mission pressed heavily upon them, driving them forward into the unknown depths of the Klingon trial. Sacred Realm. As they emerged from the caves of Kallus, battered but victorious, King and Henry were met with a mixture of awe and skepticism from the gathered Klingon. They had retrieved the sacred artifact, a feat many believed impossible for outsiders. The crowd's murmurs grew as Chancellor Cragg stepped forward to examine their prize. "You have surpassed expectations," Cragg admitted, his voice a low rumble. "But the final trial awaits. The mind sifter will reveal the true nature of your intentions." King and Henry exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of tenacity and apprehension. They had come too far to falter now, but the stories they had heard about the mind sifter were enough to give even the bravest warrior pause. As they were led to the great arena, the atmosphere grew tense. Thousands of Klingon packed the stands, their eyes fixed on the two humans who dared to prove themselves worthy of an alliance. At the center of the arena stood a device that looked more like an instrument of torture than a tool of truth, the mind sifter. Captain Henry stepped forward, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "I volunteer to go first." As Henry was secured to the device, King noticed a flurry of activity near the control panel. Chancellor can huddle with a group of technicians, their voices low and urgent. Something about their demeanor set King's nerves on edge, but before he could voice his concerns, the mind sifter hummed to life. The effect on Henry was immediate and horrifying. His body went rigid, muscles straining against unseen forces as the machine probed the depths of his mind. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Henry endured far longer than anyone had anticipated. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the arena. Sparks erupted from the mind sifter's control panel, filling the air with the acrid smell of burning circuitry. Henry slumped in his restraints, unconscious but alive. As Klingon technicians rushed to repair the device, Dr. Morrison pushed his way through the crowd, his medical scanner whirring. "Captain Henry's vital signs are erratic," he reported, his face creased with worry. "There's something odd about these readings." Before King could process this information, the technicians announced that the mind sifter was ready for the next trial. As King was led to the device, he caught sight of Counselor Kuhn's triumphant sneer. The moment the mind sifter activated, King knew something was terribly wrong. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced, as if his very thoughts were being torn from his mind. He fought against the invasion with every ounce of his will, but he could feel himself slipping. Through the haze of agony, King dimly registered a commotion in the arena. Henry, barely able to stand, was attempting to reach him, only to be repelled by a force field. Chancellor Cragg's voice boomed out, ordering an immediate halt to the trial. But Counselor Kuhn's response was lost in the roar of blood pounding in King's ears. Just as King felt his consciousness begin to fade, a new voice cut through the chaos. "I invoke the right of substitution." The pain receded enough for King to focus on the figure, striding toward the mind sifter. It was Kavol, the Klingon warrior they had rescued in the caves. "I owe these humans a debt of honor," Kavol declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "I will take the Outworlder's place in this trial." Chancellor Cragg's eyes narrowed, considering the implications of this unexpected turn. After a moment that seemed to stretch for eternity, he nodded his assent. As King was disconnected from the mind sifter, his legs gave out. Dr. Morrison was at his side in an instant, administering emergency treatment. Through blurred vision, King watched as Kavol was strapped into the device. The arena fell silent as the mind sifter activated once more. Kavol's face contorted in pain, but he did not cry out. The Klingon spectators leaned forward, captivated by this display of honor and endurance. As Kavol's trial continued, Ambassador Rodriguez approached Chancellor Cragg, her expression grave. Their hushed conversation was punctuated by Cragg's occasional nods and thoughtful grunts. King drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Dr. Morrison's worried mutterings and the persistent hum of the mind sifter. The fate of their mission, and perhaps the future of human-Klingon relations, now rested on Kavol's ability to withstand the brutal mental assault. In the stands, the mood among the Klingon had shifted. Many who had been skeptical of the humans now watched with grudging respect. Counselor Khan and his supporters, however, huddled together, their expressions growing increasingly desperate. As Kavol's trial neared its end, King forced himself to focus, knowing that the next few moments would be crucial. The mind sifter's hum rose to a fever pitch, and Kavol's body went rigid. For a heartbeat, the entire arena held its breath. Then, with a final, defiant roar, Kavol broke free of the device's hold. The mind sifter powered down, leaving the Klingon warrior battered but unbowed. Chancellor Cragg stepped forward, his face unreadable. The future of two worlds hung in the balance as he prepared to deliver his verdict. Chancellor Cragg's voice cut through the tension in the arena. "Enough," he declared, his tone brooking no argument. Kavol's act of honor speaks volumes. The trial is concluded. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. King, still reeling from the mind sifter's assault, struggled to process the sudden turn of events. He felt Dr. Morrison's steady hand supporting him as the world swam in and out of focus. "We must get him to the medical facility immediately," Morrison muttered, his voice tight with concern. As they moved through the parting crowd, King caught glimpses of the Klingon faces. Where there had been suspicion and hostility, he now saw something akin to grudging respect. Captain Henry, having regained his composure, approached Chancellor Cragg. "Chancellor, if I may have a word in private," he requested, his voice low but firm. Cragg studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Very well, Captain. Follow me." As they made their way to a secluded chamber, Ambassador Rodriguez caught Henry's eye. He gave her a subtle nod, silently communicating that it was time to push forward with their diplomatic efforts. Inside the chamber, Henry faced Chancellor Cragg. "Chancellor, there's something you need to know about the technology we used during the trials," he began, his heart pounding but his voice steady. Cragg's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly, human." Henry took a deep breath and launched into an explanation of the alien technology they had discovered on Arcadia. He detailed its integration into their systems and its role in enhancing their performance during the trials. To Henry's surprise, Cragg's expression shifted from suspicion to intrigue as he listened. When Henry finished, the Chancellor let out a low, rumbling laugh. "You humans continue to surprise me," he said. "Many would see this as deception, but I see the warrior's instinct to use every advantage." Seizing the moment, Henry proposed a joint research initiative to study and develop the technology further. Cragg's eyes gleamed with interest as he considered the possibilities. Meanwhile, in the medical facility, Dr. Morrison worked feverishly to stabilize King's condition. The first officer lay motionless on the biobed, his neural patterns erratic and unstable. "Come on, Brian," Morrison muttered, his fingers flying over the medical console. "Stay with us." Drawing on his knowledge of the alien tech in the modified communicators, Morrison began recalibrating the equipment. He adjusted the neural frequencies, carefully monitoring King's brain activity. Suddenly, King's readings stabilized. Morrison let out a sigh of relief, but his brow remained furrowed. King was out of immediate danger, but he remained trapped in a coma-like state, his mind lost in the aftermath of the mind sifter's invasive probing. As these events unfolded, Ambassador Rodriguez found herself in deep discussion with General Martok. The gruff Klingon warrior had proven to be an unexpected ally, his pragmatism outweighing his initial skepticism of the humans. "An alliance between our peoples could shift the balance of power in the quadrant," Martok growled, his one good eye fixed on Rodriguez. She nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. "Indeed, General, but it must be an alliance of equals, built on mutual respect and cooperation." Together, they began outlining a framework for the proposed alliance, covering everything from military cooperation to cultural exchange programs. News of the humans' performance in the trials and the potential alliance spread like wildfire through Konoes. In the streets of the capital, Klingon citizens gathered in boisterous groups, debating the merits of aligning with Earth. "They fought with honor," one warrior declared, pounding his fist on a nearby table. "But can they be trusted?" another countered, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. As the debate raged on, Chancellor Cragg made his decision. He called for an emergency session of the High Council to vote on the proposed alliance. Unbeknownst to the humans and their Klingon supporters, Chancellor can huddle with his loyalists in a dimly lit chamber, his face contorted with rage and desperation. He laid out his plan to sabotage the planetary defense systems. "When the rogue ships attack, we will blame the humans," he hissed. "The alliance will crumble before it begins." As Khan's conspirators slipped away to carry out their orders, Captain Henry stood before a mirror in his quarters, rehearsing his speech for the High Council. He knew that the next few hours would determine the fate of not just the alliance, but potentially the future of both their species. In the medical facility, King's eyes darted rapidly beneath closed lids, his mind trapped in a vivid dreamscape created by the mind sifter. Dr. Morrison watched the readings closely, hoping for any sign that King might soon regain consciousness. The stage was set. As both humans and Klingon prepared for the High Council session, the rogue Klingon ships moved into position, waiting for Khan's signal. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance, with forces both seen and unseen poised to shape the outcome. The tension in the air was palpable as both humans and Klingon prepared for the High Council session. Captain Henry straightened his uniform one last time, his mind racing with the potential outcomes of the upcoming negotiations. As he stepped out of his quarters, a distant rumble shook the building, followed by the piercing wail of alarms. "What in the world?" Henry muttered, his hand instinctively moving to his communicator. Before he could activate it, General Martok's gruff voice echoed through the corridor. "Captain Henry, we must move quickly. The planetary defense systems have malfunctioned." Henry's eyes widened as he processed the implications. "Malfunction? How?" Martok's face was grim as he ushered Henry towards the exit. "Unknown, but Chancellor Cragg suspects sabotage. We're escorting you to the High Council chambers immediately." As they rushed to the streets of the Klingon capital, chaos erupted around them. Civilians scrambled for shelter, while warriors mobilized, their batleths glinting in the harsh light of the emergency beacons. The sound of disruptor fire in the distance added to the growing pandemonium. Suddenly, Henry's communicator crackled to life. "Captain, it's Morrison. King's awake and, well, you need to see this for yourself. We're on our way to the council chambers, Doctor." "Is it urgent?" Henry replied, ducking as a piece of debris flew overhead. He insists on joining you. Sir says he has critical information from the mind sifter. Henry exchanged a glance with Martok, who nodded grimly. Bring him to us, Doctor. Oui, elle est le rendez-vous en route. As they navigated through the panicked crowds, Henry caught sight of Ambassador Rodriguez, making her way towards them, flanked by Klingon guards. Her usually composed demeanor was slightly shaken, but her eyes burned with commitment. Captain, she called out as she reached them, the situation is deteriorating rapidly. We need to present a united front at the council session. Before Henry could respond, the ground shook violently. Looking up, they saw the sky light up with explosions as rogue Klingon ships began their assault on the planet's surface. By Kess, Martok growled, his single eye fixed on the battle above. They're targeting our military installations. As they watched the unfolding attack, Dr. Morrison appeared, supporting a pale but alert Brian King. The first officer's eyes darted around, taking in the chaos with an unnerving intensity. Captain, King said, his voice hoarse but urgent, I know their tactics, their weaknesses. The mind sifter, it showed me things. We can use this information. Henry studied his friend's face, noting the feverish gleam in his eyes. Are you sure you're up for this, Brian? King nodded firmly. We don't have a choice. Sir, the future of both our worlds depends on what happens in the next few hours. As they approached the High Council chambers, the sounds of heated debate could be heard even over the din of battle. Chancellor Cragg's authoritative voice cut through the chaos as they entered. The session will proceed, he declared, silencing the arguing council members. His eyes fell on the human delegation as they entered. Perhaps our guests can shed some light on these events. Counselor Kun, his face contorted with barely concealed rage, pointed an accusatory finger at the humans. This attack coincides perfectly with their arrival. They must be responsible. Before the accusation could gain traction, Henry stepped forward. Chancellor, members of the High Council, we categorically deny any involvement in this attack. In fact, we offer our full support in defending Kess against these rogues. A murmur rippled through the assembled Klingon as Henry continued, outlining his proposal for a joint operation. As he spoke, King moved to his side, his eyes unfocused, but his voice clear as he began to relay the tactical information gleaned from the mind sifter. The lead ship, King said, his words coming in a rush, has a weakness in its aft shield generator. A concentrated attack there could disable their entire defense grid. The Klingon leaders listened with growing interest as King detailed more vulnerabilities and strategies. Chancellor Cragg's expression shifted from skepticism to intrigue. How do you know this? He demanded. King met the Chancellor's gaze steadily. The mind sifter, sir, connected me to the collective knowledge of your warriors. I can see their tactics, their plans. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as Cragg considered this information. Finally, he turned to General Martok. Integrate the humans into our command structure. We will face this threat together. As Martok began issuing orders, a commotion near the chamber's entrance drew everyone's attention. Counselor Kun, his face pale with fear, was attempting to slip away unnoticed. Seize him, Cragg roared, realization dawning on his face. Kun, cornered and desperate, pulled a hidden disruptor from his robes. You fool, he snarled at Cragg. You would dilute our empire with human weakness. Time seemed to slow as Kun raised the weapon, aiming directly at the Chancellor's chest. In that split second, King's enhanced reflexes kicked in. He launched himself forward, his hand closing around Kun's wrist just as the disruptor discharged. The energy beam sizzled past Cragg's ear, leaving a scorch mark on the wall behind him. In the ensuing struggle, King managed to wrench the weapon from Kun's grasp, sending it skittering across the floor. As Klingon guards subdued the treacherous counselor, Chancellor Cragg turned to the human delegation, his expression a mix of gratitude and newfound respect. "It seems we owe you a debt of honor," he said, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Now, let us show these PDQ what happens when Klingon and humans fight side by side." With a unanimous roar of approval from the Council, the newly forged Human-Klingon alliance prepared to face its first true test. As they moved to join the battle raging above Klingon, Henry couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and trepidation. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of the Klingon homeworld, but the future of interstellar relations for years to come. Come, as the newly formed alliance rushed to face the imminent threat, Captain Henry found himself in the midst of a whirlwind of activity. The High Council chamber transformed into a makeshift war room. Chancellor Cragg barked orders to his officers, while General Martok coordinated with the human delegation. At the center of it all stood First Officer Brian King, his eyes unfocused, but his voice steady as he relayed critical information gleaned from his mind-sifter experience. "The Rogue Fleet's formation has a weakness," King said, his fingers tracing invisible patterns in the air. "They're relying on traditional Klingon battle tactics, but we can exploit that predictability." Henry watched in amazement as King outlined a daring strategy that combined Klingon aggression with human unpredictability. The plan called for a three-pronged attack: a main assault force, a diversionary group, and a small, elite strike team. "General Martok," Henry said, turning to the grizzled Klingon warrior, "your forces have the firepower we need for the main assault. My ships can run interference as a diversionary group." Martok nodded, a gleam of anticipation in his eye. "And the strike team?" "I'll lead it," King said, his voice firm despite his still pale complexion. "My enhanced abilities will give us the edge we need for a covert boarding action." As the combined human-Klingon forces mobilized, Henry couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Just hours ago, they had been adversaries. Now, they were about to face a common enemy as allies. The journey to orbit was tense, the atmosphere inside Henry's ship thick with anticipation. As they cleared Konosa's turbulent upper atmosphere, the true scale of the threat became apparent. Dozens of rogue Klingon ships hung in low orbit, their weapons already firing upon the planet's surface. "All ships, battle formations," Henry commanded, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Diversionary group, prepare to engage." As Henry's ships surged forward, Martok's forces used the planet's erratic magnetic fields to mask their approach. Meanwhile, King's strike team, equipped with shuttles enhanced by the salvaged Arcadian technology, slipped quietly through gaps in the planetary defense system. The space above Kess erupted into chaos. Henry's group engaged the rogue fleet head-on, disruptors and phasers lighting up the darkness of space. The captain's hands flew over his console as he executed a series of risky maneuvers, drawing enemy fire away from Martok's approaching forces. "Evasive pattern Delta." Henry called out as enemy fire rocked his ship. "Keep their attention on us." On the planet's surface, Chancellor Cragg and Ambassador Rodriguez coordinated the ground defense from a fortified command center. Reports from the space battle flooded in, painting a picture of fierce combat and valiant resistance. "Your people fight with honor, Ambassador," Cragg said, his voice gruff but tinged with respect. Rodriguez nodded, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. "As do yours, Chancellor. Together, we stand a chance." Meanwhile, King's strike team approached the rogue flagship. The first officer's enhanced reflexes allowed him to pilot the shuttle through a storm of weapons fire, his mind already mapping out their path through the enemy's ship. As they docked and prepared to board, King turned to his mixed team of humans and Klingon. "Remember," he said, his voice low and intense, "we're fighting for both our worlds today. Let's show them what humans and Klingon can do together." With a collective roar, the strike team burst onto the rogue flagship. King led the charge, his enhanced abilities allowing him to anticipate enemy movements with uncanny accuracy. They fought their way through narrow corridors, the clash of batleths mixing with the whine of phasers. Back in space, Henry's diversionary force began to struggle against the superior numbers of the rogue fleet. Several Earth Alliance ships suffered heavy damage, forcing Henry to push his crew and his ship to their limits. "Reroute power from life support to shields," he ordered, sweat beading on his brow. "We need to hold out just a little longer." Seizing the opportunity created by Henry's diversion, Martok's forces launched a devastating attack on the rogue fleet's flank. The space around Kunis lit up with explosions as ships on both sides took heavy fire. On the rogue flagship, King and his team fought their way to the bridge. As the doors slid open, King found himself face to face with the rebel commander, a battle-hardened Klingon named Coral. "You dare invade my ship, human?" Coral snarled, drawing his batleth. King's response was to launch himself at the Klingon, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to match Coral's strength and skill. The bridge erupted into chaos as the two leaders dueled, their combat a blur of strikes and parries. Despite his enhanced abilities, King found himself pushed to the limit by Coral's experience and ferocity. The rebel commander's batleth sliced through the air, missing King's throat by millimeters, but King's mind was racing, processing every move, every potential outcome. He saw an opening and took it, ducking under Coral's guard and landing a devastating series of blows. The Klingon commander stumbled, his batleth clattering to the floor. With a final, decisive strike, King subdued Coral. The bridge fell silent as the rebel leader collapsed, unconscious but alive. Wasting no time, King accessed the flagship's communication system. His voice, tired but resolute, echoed across the rebel fleet. "Your commander has fallen. Your cause is lost. Stand down, and you may yet salvage your honor." The effect was immediate. Confusion rippled through the rogue forces. Ship after ship began to power down weapons, while others fought on with increased desperation. Martok's forces, reinvigorated by this turn of events, pressed their advantage. Henry's group, though battered, moved to support the attack. Gradually, the tide of battle turned in favor of the human-Klingon alliance. As the last pockets of resistance were quelled, King and his team secured the flagship's computer systems. What they found sent a chill through King's enhanced mind. Evidence linking Chancellor to a network of high-ranking Klingon who had supported the rebellion. As the immediate threat subsided, the full impact of what they had achieved began to sink in. Humans and Klingon had fought side by side, their strengths complementing each other in ways neither side had anticipated. But as King looked out at the battle-scarred space above Kess, he knew that the real challenge was just beginning. They had won the battle, but forging a lasting peace between their peoples would require all the skill, courage, and understanding they could muster. The flagship's view screen showed the combined fleet regrouping, Klingon and human ships flying in formation. It was a powerful image, a glimpse of a possible future. But as King's enhanced mind raced with the implications, he couldn't help but wonder, what other challenges lay ahead for this fledgling alliance? Alliance? King pushed the thought aside as the flagship's sensors blared a new alert. "Captain Henry, we're receiving an urgent transmission from the planet's surface," reported the communications officer. Henry straightened in his command chair. On screen, Chancellor Craig's face appeared, his expression a mix of triumph and urgency. "Captain Henry, First Officer King, your presence is required immediately in the Great Hall. We have matters of great importance to discuss." As their shuttle descended through Kess's turbulent atmosphere, King and Henry exchanged glances. The once hostile world now seemed different, transformed by the crucible of battle they had just endured together. The great hall of the Klingon High Council was packed to capacity, a sea of Klingon warriors interspersed with the uniforms of Earth Alliance personnel. As King and Henry entered, a hush fell over the crowd. Chancellor Craig stood at the center of the hall, his imposing figure radiating authority. "Today," he began, his voice reverberating through the chamber, We honor those who have proven themselves warriors of the highest caliber. The ceremony unfolded with a grandeur that belied the recent battle. King and Henry found themselves at the center of attention as Chancellor Cragg bestowed upon them the highest military honors of the Klingon Empire. The weight of the medals on their chests was matched only by the weight of history in that moment. Never before have humans received such recognition, Cragg declared. But never before have humans fought with such honor and skill alongside Klingon warriors. As the Chancellor spoke, King's enhanced mind raced, processing the implications of this unprecedented alliance. His thoughts were interrupted by Cragg's next announcement. "I hereby declare the formation of the Blood Oath Initiative," the Chancellor proclaimed. "A joint human-Klingon task force that will integrate our technologies and strategies. General Martok will lead this force, with Captain Henry and First Officer King as his chief advisors." The hall erupted in a roar of approval, Klingon and human voices joining in a cacophony of celebration. But the jubilation was short-lived. A Klingon officer burst into the hall, his face pale with urgency. He whispered something to Chancellor Cragg, whose expression immediately hardened. "Silence!" Cragg's voice cut through the noise. "We have received word from our border outposts. A massive fleet of unknown origin approaches Klingon space at high warp." The atmosphere in the hall shifted instantly from celebration to tension. King felt a familiar pressure building behind his eyes as his enhanced mind began to process this new threat. "Chancellor," he said, stepping forward, "I believe I may have information about this fleet." All eyes turned to King as he described the fragments of memory from his mind sifter experience. He spoke of an ancient race called the Hruk, long thought to be nothing more than legend. "Impossible," one of the Klingon counselors scoffed. "The Hruk are nothing but old wives' tales." But as King continued, describing details of Hruk technology and tactics that were not part of common knowledge, the skepticism in the room gave way to a grim realization. Chancellor Cragg's eyes narrowed. "If what you say is true, we face a threat unlike any in living memory. We must prepare for invasion immediately." Captain Henry stepped forward. "Chancellor, I have a suggestion. The alien technology we salvaged from Arcadia, we could use it to enhance your defense capabilities." Henry outlined his plan for a network of cloak sensor platforms around the Klingon border. As he spoke, King could see the Klingon leader's expressions shifting from doubt to interest. "An innovative strategy," Cragg nodded approvingly. "Make it so." As the great hall emptied, transforming into a frenzied command center, Ambassador Rodriguez approached Henry and King. "I'm transmitting an urgent request to Earth for reinforcements," she informed them. "But we can't count on their arrival before the Hruk fleet reaches us." King nodded, his mind already formulating strategies. "We need to start training immediately. Both our forces need to learn how to counter Hruk tactics." Over the next weeks, Konos became a planet transformed. The sprawling capital city, once forbidding to human eyes, now teemed with a mix of Klingon and human personnel working side by side. In orbital shipyards, Klingon battlecruisers were retrofitted with hybrid technology, their hulls filled with a mix of disruptors and phaser banks. On the ground, human engineers worked alongside Klingon scientists, racing to reverse engineer the Arcadian technology into weapons capable of challenging the Hruk. King found himself at the center of this whirlwind of activity. His enhanced mind allowed him to coordinate multiple training exercises simultaneously, drilling mixed crews of humans and Klingon in battle simulations based on ancient Hruk tactics. "Again!" he barked, as a simulated Hruk ship slipped past the defensive line. The Hruk used stellar radiation to mask their approach. "Recalibrate your sensors to compensate." As the deadline for the Hruk fleet's arrival drew near, tension on Kess reached a fever pitch. Klingon civilians fortified their homes, while human diplomatic staff found themselves fully integrated into Klingon society, working tirelessly to prepare for the coming storm. In orbit, The combined human-Klingon fleet assembled, a jam-packed array of ships from both species flying in mixed formations. It was an impressive sight, but intelligence reports suggested they were still vastly outnumbered. As King stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the fleet maneuvers, an alarm blared. The sensor network they had established was reporting an anomaly. A small Hruk vessel had broken from the main fleet and was on a direct course for Kess. King's enhanced mind raced, analyzing the scout ship's trajectory. With a jolt of realization, he turned to Captain Henry. "It's a suicide run," he said, his voice tight. "They're aiming for the capital city." Henry's face paled. "If they take out the High Council, the entire defense could crumble," King finished. In that moment, King knew what had to be done. He outlined a daring plan to intercept the scout ship using a modified bird of prey equipped with Arcadian tech. As they prepared to brief Chancellor Cragg, King couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would be pivotal. The fate of two worlds now hung in the balance, with the Hruk invasion fleet looming ever closer. Closer, the modified bird of prey, christened Fekelachar's Fong by the Klingon crew, streaked through space at maximum warp. On the bridge, King, Henry, and Chancellor Cragg stood side by side, their eyes fixed on the console. "ETA to intercept?" Henry asked, his voice taut with tension. 2 minutes, Captain," the helmsman replied. King's enhanced mind race, processing tactical data at lightning speed. "The scout ship's trajectory suggests it's on a direct course for the capital city," he reported. "If it impacts, the casualties will be catastrophic." Chancellor Cragg growled, his hand tightening on the hilt of his DK Tog. "We cannot allow that to happen. The fate of the Empire rests on this mission." As they closed in on their target, the view screen remained frustratingly empty. King frowned, his enhanced senses detecting something amiss. "Captain, the Hruk vessel should be visible by now." Henry nodded grimly. "Agreed. It must be using some form of cloaking technology." King's eyes widened as a fragment of memory from his mind sifter experience surfaced. "Captain, Chancellor, I have an idea. The Hruk use a unique form of cloaking that can be penetrated by tachyon particles at a specific frequency." Without hesitation, Henry turned to the Klingon engineer at the science station. "Modify our sensors to emit a tachyon burst at First Officer King's specifications." The engineer worked feverishly, his fingers flying over the console. "Ready, Captain." "Fire," Henry ordered. A pulse of invisible energy erupted from the bird of prey. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a veil being lifted, a massive shape materialized on the console. "Great Khalas," Cragg breathed, his eyes widening at the sight of the Hruk scout ship. It was far larger than they had anticipated, overflowing with weapons of unknown design. Before anyone could react, the Hruk vessel opened fire. Streams of sickly green energy lanced out, narrowly missing the bird of prey as Henry barked out evasive maneuvers. "Return fire," Cragg roared. The bird of prey's disruptors blazed to life, their emerald beams striking the Hruk ship's shields. King analyzed the enemy's attack patterns, his enhanced mind identifying subtle fluctuations in their shield grid. "Captain, their port shield emitter is cycling at a lower frequency. A concentrated burst of disruptor fire there could penetrate their defenses." Henry nodded sharply. "You heard him. Target that location and fire at will." The bird of prey's weapons officer, a grizzled Klingon veteran, grinned ferally as he unleashed a barrage of disruptor fire. The Hruk ship's shields flickered and failed, exposing its hull. A cheer went up on the bridge, but King's elation was short-lived. His enhanced senses detected a massive power surge building within the enemy vessel. "Captain, Chancellor, they're preparing for their final run. Energy levels are off the charts. If that ship reaches Kess, it'll vaporize half the continent." Chancellor Cragg's face hardened with perseverance. "Then we must ensure it never reaches its target." He turned to Henry, his eyes burning with dedication. "Captain, set a collision course." Henry's heart made, but he nodded in understanding. "Helm, plot an intercept course. Full impulse." As the bird of prey accelerated towards its doom, King's mind raced through possibilities. His eyes fell on the transporter controls, and a daring plan formed. "Captain, Chancellor, I have an idea. It's risky, but it might be our only chance." He quickly outlined his plan. Henry and Cragg exchanged glances, then nodded in agreement. "Make it so," Henry ordered. The bird of prey closed the distance rapidly, its hull groaning under the strain of maximum impulse. On the display, the Hruk ship loomed ever larger. "Now!" King shouted. In a shimmer of energy, the entire crew of the bird of prey vanished, rematerializing moments later in the engineering section of the Hruk vessel. They found themselves surrounded by towering, insectoid creatures with biomechanical augmentations that made them look more machine than alive. The element of surprise gave the human Klingon team a momentary advantage. King's enhanced reflexes allowed him to take down 2 Hruk before they could react. Beside him, Chancellor Cragg roared a battle cry as he engaged a massive Hruk in hand-to-hand combat. Henry and a Klingon engineer fought their way to what appeared to be the main control panel. "Cover me!" Henry shouted as he began working to decipher the alien technology. King found himself surrounded by 3 Hruk warriors. He ducked under a swipe from a biomechanical arm, using his momentum to throw one attacker into another. As the third rushed him, King's enhanced mind calculated the optimal counter. He sidestepped at the last moment, using the Hruk's own strength against it and sending it crashing into a bulkhead. Across the room, Chancellor Cragg grappled with the Hruk commander, a behemoth nearly twice his size. Despite the size difference, Cragg fought with the ferocity of a targ, his DK tog flashing as he sought weak points in the commander's exoskeleton. "Captain, we're still on course for Kess," the Klingon engineer shouted over the din of battle. King fought his way to the control panel, his enhanced mind racing to decipher the alien symbols. With seconds to spare, he input a series of commands, altering the ship's trajectory away from the Klingon homeworld and towards an uninhabited planet in the system. The Hruk ship shuddered as it entered the atmosphere of the barren world. Henry worked frantically to disable the self-destruct mechanism, while King and the others continued to fight off the remaining Hruk crew. With a final, triumphant roar, Chancellor Cragg emerged victorious over the Hruk commander. The remaining aliens, seeing their leader fall, quickly surrendered. As the adrenaline of battle faded, King established communication with the Klingon Defense Force, requesting immediate reinforcements to secure their prize. The successful capture of the Hruk scout ship had not only saved Kyonoes, but provided them with invaluable intelligence and technology. However, as King sifted through the ship's computer, he uncovered a disturbing revelation. "Captain, Chancellor," he called out, his voice grim. "We have another problem. The Hruk have established hidden outposts throughout Klingon space, sleeper cells waiting to be activated." Chancellor Cragg's eyes narrowed. "Then we must root them out before the main invasion force arrives." As reinforcements began to arrive, King, Henry, and Cragg huddled together, already planning their next move. The information they had gained was crucial, but time was of the essence. They needed to analyze the Hruk technology, coordinate strikes against the hidden outposts, and prepare for the coming invasion. The fate of both their peoples hung in the balance, and the real battle was just beginning. But as King looked at the determined faces around him, human and Klingon alike, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they just might stand a chance against the coming storm. King's revelation about the Hruk outposts sent a ripple of urgency through the command center. As the team pored over the captured data, a new discovery emerged that would change the course of their strategy. "Captain, Chancellor," King called out, his eyes fixed on the alien symbols scrolling across the screen. "I've found something." Unexpected. Henry and Cragg moved to his side, their faces etched with curiosity and concern. "There's a stasis pod in one of these outposts," King explained, his enhanced mind racing to process the information. "It contains a young Hruk female named ZYXera. She's part of their royal lineage." Cragg's eyes narrowed. "A potential queen?" King nodded. "Exactly. And if we can get to her, she could be the key to understanding the Hruk's weaknesses." Henry frowned, considering the implications. "It's risky, but the potential payoff could turn the tide of this war," Cragg finished, his voice gruff with purpose. Within hours, a plan was formulated. Captain Henry would lead a joint Human-Klingon Special Forces team to extract ZYXera from the hidden outpost. Their modified bird of prey, equipped with Arcadian cloaking technology, slipped away from killers under the cover of darkness. As they approached the small, uninhabited moon orbiting a massive gas giant, Henry studied the tactical display. The outpost location blinked ominously on the screen. "Sir," the Klingon sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting a defense grid. It can penetrate our cloak." Henry's mind raced, analyzing their options. His eyes fell on the swirling storms of the nearby gas giant. "Helm, take us in close to the planet. We'll use its magnetic field to mask our approach." The bird of prey banked sharply, skimming the turbulent upper atmosphere of the gas giant. Alarms blared as the ship bucked and shuddered, but Henry's gambit paid off. They slipped past the defense grid undetected, landing silently on the moon's dark side. The extraction team moved swiftly across the barren, rocky surface. As they breached the outpost's outer defenses, they encountered an unexpected obstacle: a small contingent of Hruk drones left behind as guards. "Phasers on full," Henry ordered as they engaged the insectoid aliens in close-quarters combat. The narrow corridors of the outpost echoed with the whine of Federation energy weapons and the distinctive crack of Klingon disruptors. As they fought their way deeper into the facility, a stray shot struck a control panel. Alarms blared, and a mechanical voice announced the activation of emergency protocols. "The stasis pod!" Henry shouted over the din. "They're waking her up." The team redoubled their efforts, fighting with renewed urgency. They broke through into a vast chamber dominated by a glowing stasis pod. But before they could reach it, a massive shape detached itself from the shadows. The Hruk Guardian was a nightmarish fusion of insectoid biology and advanced cybernetics. It shrugged off their weapons' fire, its chitinous armor barely scorched by the assault. Henry ducked under a sweeping blow that would have taken his head off. "Spread out," he ordered. "Look for weak points." The squad circled the Guardian, alternating their fire to keep it off balance. Henry noticed a slight lag in its movements when turning to face new threats. Exploiting this, he darted in close, drawing its attention. As the Guardian lunged for Henry, a Klingon warrior seized the opening. With a roar of triumph, he brought his bat'leth down in a crushing blow, finding a seam in the Guardian's armor. The massive creature collapsed, ichor pooling beneath its twitching form. "The pod!" Henry shouted, already sprinting towards the stasis chamber. "We need to move now." As they secured the pod, the outpost shuddered. A countdown appeared on nearby screens. The Guardian's death had triggered a self-destruct sequence. "Move, move, move," Henry urged, helping his team lift the heavy pod. They raced back through the crumbling facility, dodging falling debris and the last, desperate attacks of the remaining Hruk drones. They reached the extraction point with seconds to spare. As the transporter beam engulfed them, Henry caught a glimpse of the facility collapsing in on itself. They rematerialized on the bird of prey's transporter pad, the ship already breaking orbit as the outpost exploded behind them. But their mission wasn't over yet. The stasis pod hissed open, revealing its occupant. ZYXera, the young Hruk female, emerged in a burst of motion. Her multifaceted eyes darted around the unfamiliar surroundings, mandibles clicking in agitation. Henry approached slowly, hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. To his surprise, ZYXera spoke, her words halting but understandable. "Where am I? Who are you?" "I'm Captain Marcus Henry," he replied, marveling at her rapid grasp of their language. "We've rescued you from your stasis pod." ZYXera's antennae twitched, processing this information. "Rescued? But my people. They left you behind," Henry explained gently, "as a backup plan." He watched his understanding, and then betrayal flashed across ZYXera's alien features. In that moment, Henry saw an opportunity, not just for information, but for a potential ally. As the bird of prey raced back towards Kess, Henry began to form a tentative rapport with the young Hruk royal. ZYXera, feeling abandoned by her own kind, cautiously began to share insights into Hruk biology, society, and military capabilities. Their conversation was cut short as the ship's long-range sensors blared a warning. The tactical officer's voice was tight with tension as he reported, "Captain, we've detected the first wave of the Hruk invasion fleet entering Klingon space." Henry's fists tightened purpose. They were now in a race against time, carrying precious cargo that could be the key to saving both their civilizations. As Kilnoes grew larger in the view screen, Henry knew that the real challenge was just beginning. They had the information. They had ZYXera. But could they turn this advantage into a viable defense before the full might of the Hruk armada descended upon them? The bird of prey's engine strained as it pushed towards Kilnoes, carrying its vital cargo and intelligence. As soon as they landed, King sprang into action. He led a team of scientists and engineers to a hastily assembled research facility, where they began analyzing the wealth of information provided by ZYXera. The young Hruk female, still reeling from her unexpected rescue, proved to be an invaluable resource. King's enhanced cognitive abilities allowed him to process the complex data at an astonishing rate. He pored over schematics of Hruk ships, studied their biological makeup, and delved into the intricacies of their social structure. "There," King said, pointing to a holographic display of Hruk neural pathways. "Their hive mind. It's not just a biological function, it's technologically augmented." Dr. Clara, a Vulcan xenobiologist, leaned in to examine the display. "Fascinating. It appears they use a combination of pheromones and electromagnetic signals to maintain their collective consciousness." King's mind raced, connecting the dots, which means we might be able to disrupt it. If we can create a signal that interferes with their communication network, we could potentially throw their entire invasion force into disarray, Clara finished, her eyebrow raised in a rare display of excitement. As King and his team worked tirelessly on developing a disruptive signal, Captain Henry found himself in the heart of Klingon military operations. The cavernous war room buzzed with activity as human and Klingon strategists pored over star charts and tactical displays. Henry stood before a massive holographic projection of Klingon space, gesturing to key points as he spoke. "If we position our forces here, here, and here, we can create a series of choke points. The Hruk will be forced to engage us on our terms." General Koth, a grizzled Klingon veteran, nodded approvingly. "A cunning strategy, Captain. It combines the best of Klingon aggression with human precision." As they refined their battle plans, Chancellor Cragg entered the war room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Captain Henry, a word." Henry followed Cragg to a private alcove, where the Chancellor's expression grew grave. "I've made a decision regarding the Hruk female. I'm offering her asylum within the Empire in exchange for her continued cooperation." Henry's eyes widened. "Chancellor, that's unexpected. How will the High Council react?" Cragg's eyes sharp. "There will be opposition. But honor demands we use every advantage to protect our people. ZYXera's knowledge may be the key to our survival." Before Henry could respond, Alarms blared throughout the complex. They rushed back to the main display, where a sensor operator reported urgently, "Chancellor, Captain, long-range sensors have detected another fleet approaching Klingon space. Energy signatures are unknown, neither HFY nor any recognized species." The war room erupted into a flurry of activity. Klingon officers argued fiercely about how to respond to this new development, while human analysts scrambled to gather more data. King, who had just arrived with an update on the hive mind disruptor, studied the sensor readings intently. It's possible they're refugees, fleeing HFY expansion like we've seen in other sectors. Or they could be another hostile force, taking advantage of the chaos, Henry finished, his expression grim. Chancellor Cragg silenced the room with a raised hand. "We cannot fight a war on two fronts. Captain Henry, what do you suggest?" Henry took a deep breath, weighing their options. "We need more information. I recommend sending a diplomatic envoy to make first contact. If they're potential allies, we could use their help against the HFY." Cragg nodded slowly. A risky move, but one with great potential reward. "Very well. I'll have Ambassador Rodriguez prepare a team immediately." As the Chancellor left to make arrangements, King pulled Henry aside. "Captain, we've had a breakthrough with the hive mind disruptor. We've created a working prototype, but there's a complication." Henry's brow furrowed. "What kind of complication?" "The signal affects certain areas of human and Klingon brain function as well. If we deploy it, we risk incapacitating our own forces alongside the HFY." Henry ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. "We can't use a weapon that puts our own troops at risk. There has to be another way." King's eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "Actually, I think there might be. What if we modified our personal shield generators to create a protective field against the signal? Our forces could operate safely while the HFY remain vulnerable." A slow smile spread across Henry's face. "That's brilliant, Brian. Get your team working on those modifications immediately. We'll need them ready before the HFY arrive in force." As if on cue, a young Klingon officer approached them, his expression tense. "Captain Commander, we receive reports of HFY scout ships engaging our outer patrols. The invasion has begun." Henry and King exchanged determined looks. The captain squared his shoulders and addressed the war room. "This is it, people. The HFY are coming, and we need to be ready. Every piece of intelligence, every strategic advantage we can gain could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. Let's make it count." As the assembled officers and scientists dispersed to their assigned tasks, Henry couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The next few hours would determine the fate of not just the Klingon Empire or Earth, but potentially the entire quadrant. With a deep breath, he turned back to the tactical display, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war room erupted into a flurry of activity as reports of HFY scout ships engaging outer patrols flooded in. Captain Henry and Commander King exchanged a knowing look before springing into action. "We need to mobilize our strike team immediately," Henry said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Brian, gather our top operatives. We're going after their command ship." King nodded, already tapping commands into his datapad. "I'll assemble the team and begin intensive training with the captured HFY tech. We'll need every advantage we can get." As King departed, Henry turned to face Chancellor Cragg. "Chancellor, we need to send out a diplomatic envoy to make contact with that unknown fleet. They could be potential allies against the HFY." Cragg's eyes narrowed, considering the proposal. After a moment, he nodded. "Agreed. I'll dispatch Ambassador Rodriguez immediately. But, Captain, this is a great risk. If they prove hostile..." "It's a risk we have to take," Henry replied firmly. "We can't afford to ignore potential allies, not with the HFY bearing down on us." As Cragg left to make the necessary arrangements, Henry refocused on the tactical display. The Hruk invasion force was advancing rapidly, their bioorganic ships moving with an unsettling, insect-like grace through Klingon space. Hours passed in a blur of preparation and strategy sessions. Henry coordinated with Klingon battle planners, refining their defense plans and integrating the latest intelligence from their outer patrols. The atmosphere in the war room grew increasingly tense as reports of Hruk incursions became more frequent and alarming. Suddenly, a comm officer called out, "Captain Henry, we're receiving a priority transmission from Ambassador Rodriguez." Henry rushed to the communication station, heart pounding. "Put it through." Ambassador Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen, her expression a mix of excitement and urgency. "Captain, you're not going to believe this. The unknown fleet, they're refugees. Multiple species fleeing Hruk expansion in their home sectors. And they're offering to help us fight." Henry's eyes widened. "That's incredible news, Ambassador. Who's leading them?" "An alien called Zarthok," Rodriguez replied. "He's charismatic, determined. I've negotiated a temporary alliance. They're bringing ships, technology, resources we desperately need." "Excellent work, Ambassador," Henry said, his mind already racing with the tactical implications. "Get them integrated into our defense plans as quickly as possible. We'll need every ship we can muster." As Henry turned back to update Chancellor Cragg, an alarm blared through the complex. King's voice came over the comm system, tight with tension. "Captain, we have a situation in the research lab. The hive mind disruptor prototype. There's been an accident." Henry sprinted towards the lab, his heart sinking. He arrived to find chaos. Equipment scattered, scientists being treated for injuries, and at the center of it all, a smoking ruin where the prototype had been. King approached, his face grim. "A power surge. The device is completely destroyed, and we've lost valuable time and resources." Henry ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "We can't rely on the disruptor technology now. We need to rethink our entire strategy." As they stood amid the wreckage, Chancellor Cragg entered the lab, his eyes taking in the scene. "Captain, Commander, we have no time for setbacks. The High Council is demanding action." He paused, his expression conflicted. "I've made a decision regarding ZYX-era. She'll be fully integrated into our military planning, working directly with you both." Henry and King exchanged surprised glances. "Chancellor," Henry began cautiously, "are you sure that's wise? The security implications are outweighed by the tactical advantages her knowledge provides," Cragg interrupted firmly. "This is not open for discussion. Make it work." As Cragg left, Henry and King found themselves face to face with ZYX-era. The young Hruk female's multifaceted eyes darted between them, her antennae twitching nervously. "I want to help," she said, her voice still halting but determined. "My people. They left me behind, but you saved me. Let me repay that debt." Henry nodded slowly. "All right, ZYX-era. We'll put your knowledge to use. But understand, the stakes couldn't be higher. The fate of both our peoples hangs in the balance." Before ZYX-era could respond, alarms blared once again. A Klingon officer burst into the lab, his face a mask of almost unchecked excitement. "Captain, Commander, the Hruk main invasion force has entered Klingon space. The battle has begun." Henry's heart made in purpose. "This is it. Brian, get our strike team ready. We're going to hit their command ship." He turned to ZYX-era. "We'll need everything you know about Hruk ship layouts and security protocols." As they rushed from the lab towards the command center, Henry could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. The next few hours would determine the fate of not just the Klingon Empire or Earth, but potentially the entire quadrant. In the distance, the first flashes of weapons fire lit up the sky, marking the beginning of a battle that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The Human-Klingon alliance, bolstered by their newfound refugee allies, braced for impact as the full might of the Hruk invasion force descended upon them. The Human-Klingon alliance, bolstered by their newfound refugee allies, braced for impact as the full might of the Hruk invasion force descended upon Klingon space. Captain Henry's voice rang out over the din of the command center. All ships, assume defensive formations. Prepare to engage on my mark. As the massive Hruk fleet approached, a smaller, sleeker vessel broke away from the Klingon human armada. Aboard this modified Hruk scout ship, General Koth and Jack Harper led their strike team towards the heart of the enemy force. "We're approaching the organic minefield," Harper reported, his eyes fixed on the sensor readings. "ZYXera's intel better be accurate, or we're scrap metal." Koth grunted, his hand resting on the hilt of his DK Tog. "The Hruk female has proven herself thus far. We must trust in her knowledge and in our own skills." The strike team's vessel wove through the deadly maze of bioorganic mines, each pulsing with malevolent energy. Harper's fingers danced across the controls, making minute adjustments to their trajectory. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead as they narrowly avoided a cluster of mines that suddenly activated, tendrils of energy reaching for their ship. "Too close," Koth muttered, his eyes never leaving the view screen. Back on Kess, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. First Officer Brian King burst into the medical bay, where Captain Marcus Henry stood over the prone form of ZYXera. The young Hruk female writhed on the biobed, her multifaceted eyes unfocused and her mandibles clicking rapidly. "What's happening?" King demanded, rushing to Henry's side. Henry shook his head, frustration evident in his voice. "She's having some kind of psychic episode. We're trying to stabilize her condition, but our knowledge of Hruk physiology is limited." A Klingon doctor approached, holding a strange device that emitted a low hum. "We've modified one of our neural stabilizers to work with her alien biology. It should help, but we need to act quickly." As they worked to bring ZYXera back to consciousness, alarms blared throughout the complex. Chancellor Craig's voice boomed over the comm system. "All personnel battle stations. The Hruk have begun their assault on our outer colonies." Henry and King exchanged grim looks. "We need her intel," Henry said, gesturing to ZYXera. "Without it, we're flying blind against their tactics." In orbit above Kyonoes, the combined human-Klingon fleet engaged the first wave of Hruk ships. Energy weapons lanced across the void, while swarms of fighters darted between the larger vessels. The Hruk bioships moved with uncanny coordination, their attacks precise and relentless. Aboard the Klingon flagship, Chancellor Craig watched the battle unfold with a mixture of pride and concern. A young officer approached, his expression tense. "Chancellor, we're receiving reports of Hruk drop pods breaching planetary defenses on multiple colonies." Craig's eyes narrowed. He turned to his advisors, his decision made. "Initiate Project Fist of Kalas. It may be our only chance to turn the tide." "But Chancellor," one of the advisors protested, "the weapon is unstable. We risk dash." "I know the risks," Craig interrupted, his voice filled with steel. "And I deem them necessary. Do it." As the massive orbital platform powered up, drawing energy from captured Hruk technology, the ground battle on the Klingon colonies intensified. General Kvok and Colonel Sarah Donovan led their joint human-Klingon force against waves of Hruk warrior drones. "Fall back to secondary positions." Donovan shouted over the din of battle, her rifle spitting fire at the advancing horde. "Use the buildings for cover," Kvok roared a Klingon battle cry, his bat'leth slicing through chitinous armor. "Stand your ground, warriors. Today is a good day to die." Their forces fought with desperate valor, employing guerrilla tactics to offset the Hruk's superior numbers. But for every drone they cut down, 2 more seemed to take its place. Meanwhile, aboard the Hruk command ship, Koth and Harper's strike team fought their way through twisting organic corridors. The air was thick with an alien musk, and the walls pulsed with an unsettling rhythm. "We're approaching the central chamber," Harper reported, checking a captured Hruk data device. "But these readings... something's not right." As if in answer to his words, a massive door of living tissue parted before them. Inside, they found not the Hruk Queen, but a group of massive, heavily armored warriors, the Queen's elite guard. "New plan," Koth growled, raising his disruptor. "We fight our way through." The strike team engaged the elite Hruk in brutal close-quarters combat. Human stealth technology allowed them to flank their larger opponents, while Klingon martial prowess met the Hruk's strength head-on. As the battle raged across multiple fronts, Captain Henry coordinated a daring strategy from the QNOS Command Center. "All ships, execute Maneuver Omega-3. Create a gap in our lines. Let them think they've found a weakness." The human Klingon fleet, along with Zarthok's refugee ships, shifted formation. A tempting opening appeared in their defenses, and true to Henry's prediction, a significant portion of the Hruk fleet moved to exploit it. "Now!" Henry shouted, "Activate Project Fist of Kahless." The massive orbital platform unleashed a pulse of energy that rippled across space. Hruk ships caught in its path went dark, their bioorganic systems overloaded. But the weapon's power was difficult to control, and several Allied vessels also suffered damage from the blast. As the tide of battle seemed to turn, long-range sensors detected a new threat. A second Hruk fleet, even larger than the first, appeared on the edge of Klingon space. In the command center, Henry's face paled. "God help us," he murmured. "There's more of them." The human-Klingon alliance now faced a war on multiple fronts, in space, on the ground, and deep within enemy territory. The next few hours would determine not just the fate of this battle, but the future of entire civilizations across the quadrant. The command center on Kunas erupted into a frenzy of activity as the second Hruk fleet materialized on long-range sensors. Captain Henry's grip tightened on the edge of the tactical display, his knuckles tightening with tension. "Status report," he barked, his eyes never leaving the holographic representation of the incoming armada. First Officer Brian King's fingers flew across his console. "The second fleet is larger than the first, so estimates put their numbers at least double what we're currently engaging." Henry's heart made. "We need to buy time. King, coordinate with Zarthok's ships. Implement your rotating shield frequency pattern. Let's see if we can make our defenses a harder nut to crack." As King set to work, the captain opened a secure channel to the strike team aboard the Hruk command ship. "Koth, Harper, what's your status?" Static crackled over the comm before Jack Harper's strained voice came through. "We've breached the central chamber, but resistance is heavy. These aren't ordinary drones. We're up against the Queen's personal guard." In the background, the sounds of disruptor fire and the distinctive clash of Klingon batleths against Hruk carapaces filled the air. General Koth's war cry echoed through the channel as he engaged a particularly massive Hruk warrior. "We're deploying the biodisruptors now," Harper continued, his voice tight with exertion. "Stand by." On the console, Henry watched as Koth activated a series of devices. The elite Hruk guards nearest to the strike team began to twitch and convulse, their coordinated movements becoming erratic and disjointed. Seizing the moment of confusion, Koth charged forward, his modified disruptor rifle raised. With unerring accuracy, he fired a searing bolt of energy directly at the Hruk Queen. The shot connected, and an inhuman screech of pain reverberated through the command ship's organic corridors. "Direct hit on the Queen!" Koth roared triumphantly. "We're pressing our advantage." As the strike team battled deeper into the heart of the Hruk command ship, the situation on the ground was shifting. Colonel Sarah Donovan's voice crackled over the comm system, her words punctuated by the sound of heavy weapons fire. "Command, this is Donovan. We're deploying the EM pulse countermeasure. Stand by for effect." Across multiple Klingon colonies, specially designed emitters activated simultaneously. A wave of electromagnetic energy washed over the battlefields, invisible to the naked eye but devastating to the Hruk neural network. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Thousands of Hruk drones suddenly froze in place, their movements uncoordinated and purposeless. Some began to attack each other, while others simply collapsed, their connection to the hive mind severed. General Quark seized the opportunity, leading a charge of Klingon warriors. "For the Empire," he bellowed, his bat left cleaving through the confused Hruk ranks. "Push them back to the stars from whence they came." Back on Kess, Chancellor Cragg strode into the command center, his expression grim but determined. "Captain Henry, the High Council has authorized the use of the Sword of Kallus." Henry's eyes widened. "Chancellor, are you certain? The power requirements alone could leave us vulnerable if dash." "The decision is made," Cragg interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "Begin power-up sequences immediately." As technicians scrambled to bring the massive weapon online, alarms blared throughout the complex. A security officer rushed to King's side, his face pale. "Sir, we have a situation. The Hruk female ZYX-era, she's escaped." King's head snapped up from his console. "What? How?" "Unknown. Sir, she displayed abilities we weren't aware of. She's commandeered a shuttle and is heading into orbit." Before King could respond, a transmission cut through the chaos of the command center. ZYX-era's alien features filled the main view screen, her multifaceted eyes gleaming with grit. "Humans, Klingon, I thank you for your aid, but this is my fight to finish. I will confront my mother and end this invasion. Do not attempt to stop me." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Henry and King exchanged worried glances, but the approaching Hruk fleet demanded their immediate attention. "All ships, execute Maneuver Omega-7, Henry ordered, his voice steady despite the mounting pressure. "Prepare for randomized warp jumps on my mark." In space, the combined human-Klingon fleet, bolstered by Zarthok's refugee ships, began a dizzying series of tactical jumps. They appeared and disappeared around the Hruk armada, their weapons striking with surgical precision before vanishing again. Aboard the Hruk command ship, Koth and Harper's team fought their way through waves of reinforcements, inching closer to the central control nexus. Harper's fingers flew across an alien interface, uploading the carefully crafted virus. 40% uploaded, he reported, sweat beading on his forehead. "We need more time." Koth grunted as he fired his disruptor, downing another Hruk warrior. "Then we shall make time, human. Hold your position." As the battle raged across multiple fronts, Chancellor Cragg made the fateful decision. Activate the Sword of Kallus. Target the heart of their fleet. The massive orbital platform hummed to life, energy crackling along its surface. With a blinding flash, a beam of pure destruction lanced out, carving a path of devastation through the Hruk armada. But as the weapon fired, power fluctuations rippled across Kilnoes, leaving segments of the planetary defense grid dark and vulnerable. In the command center, King's face was illuminated by the eerie glow of emergency lighting. "Captain, we have multiple breaches in our defensive perimeter. Hruk landing craft are entering the atmosphere." Henry's mind raced, weighing options and potential outcomes. His eyes fell on the shuttle carrying ZYX-era, now approaching the Hruk command ship. A dangerous idea began to form. "King," he said, his voice low and intense, "I need you to prep our psionic amplifiers. We're going to use ZYX-era's connection to the Queen as a weapon." As King moved to carry out the order, the battle for the quadrant entered its most critical phase. The success or failure of these desperate gambles would determine the fate of not just the Klingon Empire, but of countless worlds across the galaxy. As the command center erupted into frenzied activity, Captain Henry's gaze snapped back to the tactical display, his mind racing to process the rapidly evolving situation. King, status on the psionic amplifiers. He barked, his fingers flying across the console to initiate new battle protocols. Online and ready, sir, King responded, his voice tight with tension. Calibrating to ZY-Xera's brainwave patterns now. The air in the command center crackled with energy as the psionic transmitter hummed to life. On the main view screen, a wave of confusion rippled through the Hruk fleet. Ships began to veer off course, their formations breaking apart as the hive mind struggled against the psychic interference. "It's working," Henry breathed, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Now's our chance. All ships, execute attack pattern Delta 6. The combined human-Klingon fleet surged forward, exploiting gaps in the Hruk defense. Disruptor fire and photon torpedoes lanced through space, finding their marks with deadly precision. Aboard the Hruk command ship, Koth and Harper fought their way through waves of reinforcements. The organic corridors pulsed with an angry red light, the ship itself seeming to recoil from the invaders. 30 meters to the control nexus. Harper shouted over the din of battle, his rifle spitting fire at an oncoming group of drones. "We're almost there." Koth grunted in acknowledgement, his bat left cleaving through a Hruk warrior's carapace. "Then let us finish this, human." As they pressed forward, a familiar figure materialized from a side passage. ZY-Xera, her alien features set in steadfast perseverance, fell into step beside them. "You've done well," she said, her multifaceted eyes scanning the corridor ahead. "But my mother awaits. This is my fight to end." Before either Koth or Harper could respond, ZY-Xera raised her hands. A pulse of psychic energy radiated outward, causing the lesser Hruk drones in their path to collapse, twitching and inert. "Impressive," Koth rumbled, eyeing their unexpected ally with newfound respect. The trio burst into the central chamber, a vast, pulsating space dominated by organic technology. At its center stood the Hruk Queen, her massive form radiating malevolence. "Upload the virus," ZY-Xera commanded, her voice strained as she locked eyes with her mother. "I'll handle her." As Harper raced to the central console, ZY-Xera and the Queen engaged in a fierce psychic duel. The air between them shimmered with invisible energy, their minds grappling for control of the hive. On the surface of Kyonoas, Colonel Donovan and General Quark led their forces in a desperate push to reclaim key strategic positions. The electromagnetic pulse technology proved devastatingly effective, leaving swaths of Hruk drones paralyzed in its wake. "Press the advantage," Quark roared, his bat left singing as it cut through the air. "For the Empire," Donovan's voice crackled over the comm, steady despite the chaos of battle. "All units, form up on my position. We're taking back the capital, block by block if we have to." In orbit, the ancient Klingon weapons platforms roared to life, their massive energy cannons acquiring targets with terrifying speed. Chancellor Cragg watched from the command center, a mix of awe and trepidation on his face as the long-dormant weapons unleashed their fury on the Hruk fleet. "By Khalis," he murmured, "I pray we haven't unleashed something we can't control." Captain Henry's voice cut through the tension. "Chancellor, we're detecting a massive energy buildup in the Hruk command ship. They're initiating some kind of self-destruct sequence." Cragg's eyes widened in horror. "If that ship detonates this close to Kess—" "I know," Henry said grimly. "We're out of time. King, boost power to the psionic transmitter. We need to give ZY-Xera and our strike team every advantage we can." As the battle reached its crescendo, the fate of Kyonos, and perhaps the entire quadrant, hung in the balance. In the Ruck Command ship's central chamber, ZYXera strained against her mother's psychic onslaught, sweat beading on her alien brow. "Now, Harper," she cried out, her voice strained with effort. "Upload the virus." Harper's fingers flew across the alien console, the carefully crafted code streaming into the Ruck systems. Koth stood guard, his disruptor rifle felling any drones that managed to break through ZYXera's psychic barrier. As the virus took hold, the ship shuddered beneath their feet. Across the Ruck fleet, vessel after vessel began to falter, their bioorganic systems failing under the relentless digital assault. But the Queen wasn't finished. With a shriek of rage, she lashed out with a final, desperate psychic attack. ZYXera stumbled, her concentration wavering for a critical moment. "No!" Harper shouted, abandoning the console to rush to her aid. But before he could reach her, a blinding flash of energy erupted from the Queen's form, engulfing the chamber in searing light. As the fate of the strike team hung in the balance, the battle for Kess entered its final, desperate phase. The next few moments would determine whether the combined might of humans and Klingon could turn back the Ruck tide, or if the invaders would claim yet another world for their ever-expanding hive. Hive! As the blinding flash subsided, Harper blinked rapidly, struggling to regain his vision. Through the haze, he saw ZYXera still standing, her form trembling but unbowed. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship, their urgent wails echoing through the organic corridors. The floor beneath their feet shuddered ominously. "What's happening?" Harper shouted over the cacophony, his eyes darting between ZYXera and the Queen. Koth's gravelly voice cut through the chaos. "The ship's self-destruct sequence has been initiated." As if to confirm his words, a booming announcement reverberated through the chamber in the guttural Ruck language. ZYXera's eyes widened in alarm. "We have minutes before this vessel is obliterated," she translated, her voice strained from the psychic exertion. Harper's comm link crackled to life, First Officer King's voice urgent in his ear. "Strike team, evacuate immediately. We're clearing a buffer zone around the Ruck command ship." Koth growled, hefting his disruptor rifle. "Then let us not delay. We must reach the escape pods." As they turned to leave, a surge of Ruck drones poured into the chamber, their mandibles clicking in eerie synchronization. The strike team found themselves trapped, caught between the approaching horde and the incapacitated but still dangerous Queen. "This way!" ZYXera shouted, gesturing towards a pulsating membrane in the chamber's wall. With a burst of psychic energy, she tore the organic material apart, revealing a twisting passage beyond. The trio plunged into the ship's labyrinth and innards, the sounds of pursuing drones echoing behind them. They fought their way through deck after deck, Koth's batleth and Harper's rifle clearing a path through the relentless Ruck defenders. As they battled, the ship's structure groaned and shifted around them. Tendrils of energy crackled along the walls, the self-destruct sequence wreaking havoc on the vessel systems. In orbit around Kess, Captain Henry's voice rang out across the comm channels. "All ships, execute precision warp jumps on my mark. Prepare to deploy graviton emitters." The combined fleet sprang into action, ships blinking in and out of existence as they maneuvered into position around the doomed Ruck command ship. In their wake, they left a network of devices, each pulsing with awe-inspiring energy. On the planet's surface, Chancellor Cragg strode purposefully through the command center, his eyes fixed on the tactical displays. "Divert power from the planetary defense grid," he ordered, his voice brooking no argument. "Boost the psionic transmitter's output." Technicians scrambled to comply, and across Kess, sections of the defense grid winked out. In their place, a surge of energy flowed into the psionic amplifiers, their hum rising to a fever pitch. Aboard the Ruck command ship, ZYXera stumbled mid-stride, her eyes widening in surprise. "The transmitter," she gasped. "Its power. I can feel it." With renewed vigor, she reached out with her mind, pushing back against the Queen's lingering psychic presence. The ship trembled around them, caught in the crossfire of their mental battle. "We're approaching the engineering section," Harper called out, consulting a holographic map projected from his wrist device. "If we can reach it, we might be able to slow down the self-destruct sequence." Koff nodded grimly, his bat-left cleaving through another drone that blocked their path. "Then let us make haste, human. Our time grows short." As they fought their way towards engineering, the ancient Klingon weapons platforms in orbit roared to life. Beams of searing energy lanced out, weaving a complex pattern around the Hruk command ship. The lattice of energy beams formed a shimmering cage, designed to contain the impending explosion. Inside the ship, Harper, Koff, and ZYX-Era finally burst into the engineering section. Banks of pulsating organic computers lined the walls, their surfaces crawling with alien symbols. "Cover me," Harper said, rushing to the nearest console. His fingers flew over the unfamiliar interface, applying everything he had learned about Hruk technology. Koff positioned himself at the entrance, his disruptor rifle spitting green fire at the approaching drones. ZYX-Era stood in the center of the room, her eyes closed in concentration as she maintained her psychic link with the Queen. "I can't stop it completely," Harper shouted over the sound of battle, "but I think I can modify the blast yield. Make it more focused, less destructive." As he worked, ZYX-Era's eyes snapped open. "I've done it," she announced, her voice filled with a mix of triumph and sorrow. "I've issued the command to the hive mind. All Hruk forces are standing down." The effect was immediate. The drones at the entrance froze in place, their weapons lowering. Throughout the ship, the sounds of battle faded to an eerie silence. But the respite was short-lived. The ship shuddered violently, and a new alarm joined the cacophony of warning signals. "The self-destruct sequence is entering its final stage," Harper warned, his hands still moving frantically over the console. "We need to get out of here now." As if in answer to his words, the air around them began to shimmer. The familiar tingle of a transporter beam enveloped them, King's voice crackling through their comlinks. "Hold on, we're getting you out." In a flash of light, Harper and Koff vanished from the engineering section, but ZYX-Era remained, her form still solid and untouched by the transporter beam. "I can't leave," she said, her voice filled with dedication. "I must maintain control over the hive mind until the very end." As Harper and Koff materialized aboard an Allied ship, they saw the Hruk command vessel through a view screen. It pulsed with ominous energy, the combined efforts of the graviton emitters and Klingon weapons platforms barely containing its building power. In the final seconds before detonation, a small object ejected from the massive ship. The Hruk command vessel imploded in a blinding flash of light, collapsing in on itself and leaving behind a swirling vortex of subspace energy that quickly winked out of existence. As the light faded and sensors came back online, all eyes turned to the small, battered escape pod drifting amidst the debris field. Recovery teams raced to investigate, their scanners probing the pod's interior. Inside, they found an unconscious form, ZYX-Era, battered but alive, having broken free from her psychic link at the last possible moment. As medical teams rushed to tend to the wounded and engineering crews began assessing the damage, the leaders of the Alliance gathered to take stock of their hard-won victory. The Hruk invasion had been halted, but the cost had been enormous. Chancellor Craig's voice echoed across the comm channels, his tone somber yet tinged with pride. "To all forces, stand fast. The battle is won, but our work is just a beginning." Captain Henry nodded grimly, his eyes scanning the tactical displays. The combined fleet hung in orbit around QNOS, battered but unbroken. Zarthok's refugee ships moved among them, already beginning to assist with repairs. As the immediate crisis passed, new questions began to surface. What would become of the captured Hruk technology, How would this newfound alliance between humans, Klingon, and refugees evolve? And what of ZYX-era, the Hruk rebel who had played such a crucial role in their victory? The answers to these questions would shape the future of the quadrant, but for now, the Allied forces focused on the immediate tasks at hand, securing their victory, tending to their wounded, and preparing for whatever challenges might yet lie ahead. As the dust settled on the monumental battle, the Allied forces turned their attention to the immediate aftermath. The small escape pod containing ZYX-era was quickly retrieved, and medical teams rushed to assess her condition. Dr. Marcus Reeves, a human xenobiologist with years of experience studying alien physiology, took charge of ZYX-era's care. His team worked tirelessly in the makeshift medical bay aboard the USS Excalibur, their faces etched with concentration as they battled to stabilize her unique biology. Her neural pathways are unlike anything I've ever seen, Dr. Reeves muttered, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of ZYX-era's brain activity. The psychic strain she endured. It's a miracle she's alive. As ZYX-era lay unconscious, her mind still reeling from the intense battle with the Hruk Queen, the Alliance began the daunting task of securing their hard-won victory. Captain Henry, his uniform still bearing the scorch marks of battle, strode purposefully through the corridors of the Excalibur. He entered the ship's main conference room, where Chancellor Cragg and other key leaders had gathered. The air was thick with tension and exhaustion, but there was no time for rest. "Gentlemen," Henry began, his voice steady despite his fatigue, "we've won the battle, but we have a lot of work ahead of us." Chancellor Cragg nodded, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the tactical displays. "Indeed, Captain, the Hruk may be defeated, but we must ensure they cannot threaten us again." As they spoke, engineering teams from both human and Klingon ships swarmed over the captured Hruk vessels. Dr. Alan Carter, a brilliant human scientist with a reputation for unorthodox thinking, found himself working alongside Targ, a grizzled Klingon weapons expert. "Fascinating," Carter murmured, his hands hovering over the organic circuitry of a Hruk computer core. "Their technology is a perfect fusion of biological and mechanical components." Targ grunted, his own focus on a disassembled Hruk energy weapon. "It is formidable, yes, but we will unlock its secrets and turn their strength against them." Back on Kilnoes, Chancellor Cragg wasted no time in implementing new defensive measures. He summoned his top strategists and engineers to the Great Hall, their voices echoing off the ancient stone walls as they debated the best course of action. "We must create a network of early warning beacons," Cragg declared, his fist slamming down on the table for emphasis. "No Hruk ship will ever again enter our space undetected." As plans for Operation Vigilant Eye took shape, the Alliance faced another pressing issue. The refugee species led by Zarthok, their home worlds destroyed by the Hruk, found themselves without a place to call home. In a move that surprised many, the Klingon High Council convened an emergency session to address the matter. The debate was fierce, with traditionalists arguing against welcoming aliens into Klingon space. But in the end, pragmatism won out. "We offer these refugees a home within our territory," Cragg announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. "Their knowledge and technology will strengthen our empire, and in turn, we shall protect them." The news of this decision spread quickly, reaching Earth just as the United Earth government convened its own emergency session. Admiral Jonathan Hayes, a veteran of countless conflicts, stood before the assembled leaders, his weathered face grave. "The Hruk invasion has shown us that we cannot stand alone," Hayes declared. "I propose the formation of a joint human-Klingon defense fleet, a sentinel force, ready to respond to any threat anywhere in our combined territories." As debates raged and plans were made, the USS Excalibur became a hive of activity. First Officer Brian King, newly promoted to captain, oversaw the integration of human and Klingon technologies into the ship systems. "Route the power from the Klingon Singularity Core through our warp coils," King ordered, his eyes darting between multiple display screens. I want to see just how fast this hybrid drive can push us. Meanwhile, in the medical bay, Zhuaixera began to stir. Dr. Reeves leaned in, his voice gentle but urgent. Can you hear me? Do you know where you are? Zhuaixera's eyes fluttered open, her alien features contorting in a mix of confusion and pain. The Queen, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Is she? Defeated, Dr. Reeves assured her. Thanks in no small part to you. But now, we need your help again. Your knowledge of Hruk biology and technology could be crucial to our efforts. As Zhuaixera slowly regained her strength, she began sharing invaluable insights with the research teams. Her unique perspective shed new light on the captured Hruk technology, accelerating the Alliance's efforts to adapt and improve their defenses. But even as progress was made, new challenges emerged. Reports began to trickle in of renegade Hruk attacks on outlying colonies. Captain King and the USS Excalibur were dispatched to investigate, marking the first true test of the new human-Klingon military cooperation. As the Excalibur warped towards the troubled sector, King addressed his mixed crew of humans and Klingon. This is what we've trained for, he said, his voice firm. Together, we'll show these Hruk stragglers the true strength of our alliance. The ship dropped out of warp near a small mining colony, its sensors immediately detecting the presence of several Hruk Raider ships. King's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the tactical display. Battle stations, he ordered, his voice calm but charged with purpose. Let's see what this new alliance can do. The Excalibur's sensors lit up with activity as the Hruk Raiders came into range. Captain King's eyes narrowed, his mind already formulating battle strategies. Target the lead ship, he ordered. Fire quantum torpedoes on my mark. But before King could give a command, the ship's long-range sensors detected an anomaly that overshadowed the immediate threat. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, the ship's science officer, called out from her station. Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy surge from Sector 3721. It's off the chart, sir. King's attention snapped to the main view screen as it displayed a visual of the phenomenon. A swirling vortex of energy pulsed in the distance, its signature unmistakably Hruk in origin, but amplified beyond anything they had encountered before. Magnify, King ordered, his voice tense. As the image zoomed in, the bridge crew collectively held their breath. The energy surge emanated from a point far beyond the borders of both human and Klingon space, in an unexplored region of the galaxy. Analysis, Commander Chen, King demanded. Chen's fingers flew over her console, her brow furrowed in concentration. The energy signature matches Hruk technology, sir, but it's orders of magnitude more powerful than anything we've seen. I can't even begin to estimate its full potential. King tapped his communicator. Bridge to engineering. Commander Vorik, I need everything you can give me from the warp drive. We're changing course. The Vulcan chief engineer's calm voice replied, Understood, Captain. I'll push the new hybrid drive to its limits. King turned to his tactical officer. Contact Kess. Inform Chancellor Cragg of the situation and request backup. We're going to need it. As the Excalibur altered course, leaving the Hruk Raiders behind, a transmission came through from Klingon High Command. Chancellor Cragg's face appeared on the console, his expression grave. Captain King, we've detected the anomaly as well. This could be the greatest threat we've faced since the invasion. I'm dispatching the IKS Cortaf to rendezvous with you. Her captain, Kun, is one of our finest warriors. You will have command of this joint mission. King nodded, understanding the significance of this unprecedented cooperation. Acknowledged, Chancellor. We'll make for the coordinates immediately. As the Excalibur streaked through space at maximum warp, King briefed his senior staff on the situation. The tension in the room was palpable as they discussed the potential implications of such a massive HFY energy signature. Hours later, the Excalibur dropped out of warp near the coordinates of the energy surge. The IKS Cortaf decloaked alongside them, its imposing form a testament to Klingon engineering. "Captain," Chin called out, her voice tight with urgency. "Sensors are detecting a vast debris field ahead. It's composed of HFY vessels, sir." The view screen shifted to show a graveyard of shattered HFY ships, their biomechanical forms twisted and broken. The destruction was total, far beyond anything their combined fleets had managed during the invasion. "By Kalas," breathed Commander Korak, the Klingon liaison officer aboard the Excalibur. "What could have done this?" Before anyone could respond, a transmission came through from the Cortaf. Captain Khan's face appeared on the screen, his expression a mix of awe and battle readiness. "Captain King, are you seeing this?" Khan asked, his voice gruff. King nodded grimly. "Indeed, Captain Khan. Whatever did this is still out there. Recommend we proceed with extreme caution." As the two ships carefully navigated the debris field, their sensors probed deeper into the surrounding space. Suddenly, Chen's console erupted with activity. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive structure hidden within a dense nebula, bearing 047 Mark 198. It's unlike anything in our database." King leaned forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on the display as it displayed the nebula. "Can we get a visual?" The image shifted and zoomed, penetrating the swirling gases of the nebula. There, emerging from the cosmic mist, was a colossal space station. Its surface was covered in intricate, pulsing patterns that seemed to defy conventional engineering. "Fascinating," Chin murmured, her scientific curiosity overriding her apprehension. "The station appears to be emitting a low-frequency signal. It's interfering with our communications." King stood, his decision made. "Assemble an away team. We need to investigate the station up close. Contact the Cortaf. Inform Captain Khan that I request his presence on this mission." As the away team prepared for departure, a garbled transmission broke through the interference. It was Chancellor Cragg, his voice distorted but urgent. "Captain King, danger. Ancient civilization. Awakening. Proceed with caution." The message cut off abruptly, leaving the bridge crew exchanging worried glances. King's mind focused as he turned to his first officer. "Commander Ramirez, you have the bridge. Keep the ship at yellow alert and maintain constant scans of the area. If anything so much as twitches out there, I want to know about it." With that, King led his away team to the transporter room, joined by Captain Khan and a contingent of Klingon warriors. As they materialized aboard the alien station, they found themselves in an environment that defied their understanding of physics and engineering. The corridors seemed to shift and change as they moved, gravity fluctuating unpredictably. Biomechanical interfaces lined the walls, responding to their presence with holographic displays of indecipherable symbols. "Stay alert," King warned, his hand resting on his phaser. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." As they ventured deeper into the station, the away team encountered a vast chamber that took their breath away. Thousands of stasis pods lined the walls, most empty but some still occupied by alien beings in suspended animation. King approached one of the occupied pods, his eyes widening in recognition. "This can't be," he muttered, studying the being inside. "This species. It matches descriptions from Earth's ancient legends." Before anyone could respond, the station system suddenly surged to life. Pods began to open, and the alien beings within stirred, awakening from their millennia-long slumber. The first to emerge was a tall, silver-skinned humanoid. It stood before the stunned away team, its eyes scanning them with an intelligence that seemed to pierce through to their very souls. "I am Xanthor," the being spoke, its voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "Last of the progenitors. And you, it seems, are the latest to face the scourge we sought to contain. As more aliens awakened, tension filled the air. Captain Khan signaled his warriors to take up defensive positions, his instincts honed by years of battle-screaming danger. King stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. I am Captain Brian King of the United Earth Starship Excalibur. We come in peace, seeking understanding. Xanthor's gaze shifted between King and Khan, a flicker of curiosity in its alien eyes. Human and Klingon working together? Fascinating. Perhaps there is hope for this cycle after all. Before King could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. Chen's voice crackled through the communicator, filled with urgency. Captain, multiple Hruk ships approaching rapidly. They appear heavily damaged, but are on an intercept course with the station. The Excalibur and Cortaf are preparing for battle, but we're severely outgunned. King's mind raced, acutely aware of the precarious situation they now faced. Inside the station, they stood on the precipice of first contact with an ancient, powerful civilization. Outside, a battered but determined Hruk fleet threatened to reignite the war they had so recently won. As Xanthor and the other awakening aliens regarded them with a mix of curiosity and wariness, King knew that his next decisions would shape not just the future of the human-Klingon alliance, but potentially the fate of the entire galaxy. King took a deep breath, his mind racing through potential strategies. The situation demanded swift action, but one wrong move could spark a conflict with catastrophic consequences. Xanthor, King began, his voice steady despite the tension. We face a common threat. The Hruk have ravaged our worlds, and now they approach this station. We propose an alliance, your advanced technology combined with our tactical expertise. The progenitor's silver eyes seemed to shimmer as it considered King's words. Meanwhile, Captain Khan's warriors shifted restlessly, their hands never far from their weapons. Recognizing the powder keg nature of the situation, King tapped his communicator. Excalibur, this is King. Deploy portable force field generators to my coordinates immediately. Within moments, shimmering energy barriers sprang to life, creating a neutral zone between the awakening progenitors and the Klingon contingent. The move visibly eased tensions, though suspicion still hung thick in the air. Outside, the battle erupted in earnest. The Excalibur's hybrid drive allowed it to dance between the lumbering Hruk vessels, its phasers lancing out with precision. The Cortaf decloaked in the midst of the enemy formation, its disruptors tearing through bioorganic hulls. On the Excalibur's bridge, Commander Ramirez gripped the arms of the captain's chair as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. Evasive pattern Delta. Target their propulsion systems. The battle's tide began to turn as more Hruk ships poured into the system, drawn by the station's energy signature. The Excalibur's shields flickered dangerously, while the Cortaf's primary weapons array erupted in a shower of sparks and debris. Back on the station, Xanthor's fingers danced over holographic controls, bringing long-dormant systems online. Massive energy weapons began to hum with power, their potential destructive force beyond anything the humans or Klingon had ever witnessed. King's eyes widened as he realized the implications. Xanthor, those weapons. They could obliterate the Hruk fleet, but at what cost? The collateral damage could be catastrophic. The progenitor turned its penetrating gaze on King. You show wisdom, human. Perhaps there is more to your species than we first assumed. What do you propose? Before King could respond, a priority transmission cut through the interference. Admiral Hayes' hologram materialized, his expression grim. Captain, we've deployed the Sentinel Force. The USS Avalon is leading the charge, but we're detecting a massive Hruk fleet entering the sector. This could be their endgame. King's mind raced, formulating a plan. He turned to Khan, who had been listening intently. Captain, we need to put aside our differences. The Hruk threat demands a united front. Kun's eyes narrowed, but he nodded curtly. Agreed. My warriors will stand with you, King, for the glory of the Empire and the survival of both our peoples. With the temporary alliance secured, King addressed Xanthor. We need to coordinate our efforts. Your weapons, combined with our fleet's tactics, could turn the tide. Will you join us? Xanthor studied the humans in Klingon, seeming to look beyond their physical forms. After a moment that felt like an eternity, it nodded. We will share control of the station's defenses. Your willpower intrigues us. Perhaps this cycle will yield different results. As Xanthor began instructing both human and Klingon personnel on the operation of the advanced systems, the station's long-range sensors detected the approach of the main Hruk fleet. The data streamed to the Excalibur and Cortaf, painting a grim picture of the odds they faced. Outside, the battle intensified. The Excalibur's shields failed under a barrage of Hruk biotorpedoes, exposing its hull to the vacuum of space. Emergency force fields snapped into place as damage control teams rushed to contain the breaches. Just as all seemed lost, space itself seemed to tear open. The Sentinel force emerged from warp, led by the sleek, deadly form of the USS Avalon. Its experimental weapons flared to life, carving swaths of destruction through the Hruk ranks. On the bridge of the Avalon, Captain Elena Cortez barked orders. All ships form up, create a defensive perimeter around that station. Whatever's in there, we can't let the Hruk get their claws on it. The combined human-Klingon fleet spread out, their formation a dripping wall of firepower between the station and the encroaching Hruk armada. But even with their numbers bolstered, the aliens' bioships seemed endless, a tide of chitinous horror threatening to overwhelm them. In the midst of the chaos, a garbled transmission broke through. Chancellor Cragg's face appeared on screens throughout the fleet, his expression a mix of fierce pride and unbreakable spirit. Warriors of the Alliance, the Empire has awakened its mightiest weapons. The ancient platforms approach. Hold the line. As if summoned by Cragg's words, massive structures began to materialize at the edges of the battlefield. The legendary Klingon weapons platforms, relics of a bygone era, surged forward on long-dormant warp drives. Their weapons blazed to life, unleashing devastation upon the Hruk fleet. Back on the station, King and Xanthor worked feverishly to bring the primary weapon online. The massive energy cannon hummed with power beyond comprehension, sending tremors through the very fabric of space-time. Energy levels at maximum, King reported, his fingers flying over the alien controls. Targeting systems aligned. On your mark, Xanthor. The progenitor's silver hand hovered over the firing mechanism. Together, Captain, let us show these invaders the folly of their actions. As one, they activated the weapon. A blinding beam of pure energy lanced out from the station, cutting through the Hruk fleet like a scythe through wheat. Dozens of bioships disintegrated instantly, while others spiraled out of control, their organic systems disrupted by the weapon's otherworldly power. The tide of battle shifted dramatically. The Sentinel force pressed their advantage, their coordinated assault wreaking havoc on the Hruk command ships. The Excalibur and Cortaf, battered but unbroken, joined the fray with renewed vigor. As the Hruk fleet began to falter, their formations breaking apart, King allowed himself a moment of hope. But he knew the war was far from finished. The progenitor's return, the continued Hruk threat, and the newfound alliance between humans and Klingon had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. King's gaze swept over the assembled forces, human, Klingon, and progenitor, united against a common foe. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The next moves they made would shape the future of countless worlds, and King was determined to ensure that future was one of peace and cooperation, not endless conflict. As the last Hruk ships retreated or were destroyed, a tense silence fell over the battlefield. The Alliance had won the day, but at what cost? And what new trials awaited them in the wake of this victory? Only time would tell. As the last echoes of battle faded, Captain King surveyed the scene before him. The progenitor station hummed with newfound energy, its ancient systems fully awakened. Beside him, Xanthor's silver form seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. "We've won the day," King said, his voice low and thoughtful. "But this is just the beginning." Xanthor nodded, its alien eyes reflecting the starlight streaming through the station's viewports. "Indeed, Captain, the true challenges lie ahead." King tapped his communicator. "Excalibur, status report." Commander Ramirez's voice crackled through, strained but steady. "We're still standing, Captain, but barely. Multiple hull breaches, shields offline, and primary systems running on emergency power." "Understood. Begin immediate repairs." "I'm establishing a joint task force to study the station's technology. Have Dr. Carter report to my location." King turned to Captain Kun, who stood nearby, his battle-worn armor bearing fresh scars from the recent conflict. "Captain, I propose we combine our efforts. Your engineers working alongside ours could speed up repairs and unlock new possibilities." Kun's eyes narrowed for a moment, then he nodded curtly. "Agreed. I will send Tard to join your task force. His expertise in Klingon weapon systems may prove useful." As the two captains coordinated their next moves, the station's long-range sensors flared to life. Holographic displays materialized around them, showing the aftermath of the battle and the broader strategic picture. Dr. Alan Carter arrived, his eyes wide with excitement as he took in the advanced technology surrounding them. "Captain, this is incredible. The potential applications of this progenitor tech are beyond anything we've ever seen." Targ, the Klingon weapons expert, materialized via transporter moments later. He immediately moved to examine the station's systems, his gruff demeanor softening slightly in the face of such advanced technology. "Fascinating," he muttered, running a hand over a biomechanical interface. "These systems could revolutionize our understanding of quantum mechanics and energy manipulation." As the scientific team began their work, King received a priority communication from Admiral Hayes. The Admiral's hologram appeared, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Captain, excellent work out there. But we're not out of the woods yet. I'm convening an emergency meeting of the United Earth Government to discuss the implications of this discovery. We need to establish a framework for managing these new technologies and our relationship with the progenitors." King nodded, understanding the weighty responsibility that now rested on their shoulders. "Understood, Admiral. We'll continue our analysis here and transmit all findings directly to you." As the hologram faded, Xanthor approached King. "Your people show great potential, Captain. But I must warn you, the power contained within this station is beyond anything your civilizations have encountered. It must be wielded with the utmost care and wisdom." Before King could respond, a new alert sounded. A Klingon scout ship was approaching at high warp. Within moments, it dropped out of warp near the station, and a familiar figure materialized on the command deck. Ziwaixera stepped forward, her eyes immediately locking onto Xanthor. The progenitor seemed to study her intently, an unspoken communication passing between them. "Fascinating," Xanthor murmured. "Your genetic structure. It resonates with our technology in a most unusual way." King watched as Ziwaixera approached one of the biomechanical interfaces. As her hand touched the surface, the entire system pulsed with energy. Holographic displays sprung to life around her, responding to her thoughts in ways they hadn't for anyone else. "Captain," Ziwaixera said, her voice filled with awe, "I can sense the station systems. It's like they're an extension of my own mind." Dr. Carter rushed over, His scientific curiosity piqued. Incredible, ZYX-era. Your unique genetic makeup must allow for direct neural interfacing with the progenitor tech. The implications for communication and control are staggering. As the team continued to explore the station's capabilities, King received another urgent transmission. This time, it was from a cloaked Klingon probe ship deep in HFY space. The sensor data streaming in painted a chaotic picture. Entire HFY colonies were breaking away from central control, turning on their former queens in a frenzy of independence. The fragmentation of the hive mind, first observed during the recent battle, had become a full-scale rebellion. King's mind raced with the possibilities. He turned to the assembled team, human, Klingon, and progenitor alike. "We have an opportunity here," he said, his voice filled with commitment. "The HFY Empire is fracturing. If we act now, we might be able to end their threat once and for all." He quickly outlined his plan, a three-pronged assault leveraging the combined strengths of their alliance. The main fleet would strike at HFY production centers, while covert ops teams supported rebel factions. And with the progenitor weapons, they could target the remaining connections within the hive mind itself. As the team debated the merits of the plan, the station sensors suddenly flared with urgent warnings. A massive energy surge had been detected at the heart of HFY space, dwarfing even the output of the progenitor station. Xanthor's eyes widened in alarm. This energy signature. It bears similarities to ancient weapons we once faced. If the HFY have unearthed such technology, the consequences could be catastrophic. King knew they were now in a race against time. They needed to launch their offensive before the HFY could stabilize their empire, but rushing in unprepared could lead to disaster. As he began to formulate a strategy that would balance speed with caution, King couldn't shake the feeling that the coming days would shape the destiny of the universe for generations to come. The alliance of humans, Klingon, and progenitors stood on the precipice of a new era, one filled with both incredible potential and unimaginable danger. With a deep breath, King turned to address the assembled team. The weight of command had never felt heavier, but he knew that together, they had a chance to forge a future beyond anything they had ever dreamed possible. Captain King's mind raced as he processed the information from the Klingon probe ship. The fragmentation of the HFY hive mind presented a unique opportunity, one they couldn't afford to waste. He quickly shared the intelligence with the assembled team, watching as their expressions shifted from surprise to drive. "We need to act fast," King declared, his voice steady and resolute. "Admiral Hayes, I propose an immediate offensive against the HFY Empire. We can exploit their internal chaos and potentially end this threat once and for all." The Admiral's hologram nodded gravely. "Agreed, Captain. Coordinate with Chancellor Cragg and prepare a battle plan. I'll mobilize every available ship in the fleet." As King began outlining his strategy, Dr. Carter suddenly called out from his workstation. "Captain, I've made a breakthrough with the progenitor tech. You need to see this." King hurried over, followed closely by Xanthor and ZYX-era. The scientists pulled up a series of complex diagrams on the holographic display. "By combining ZYX-era's unique abilities with the station systems, we've discovered a way to create a targeted disruption field," Carter explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "It can neutralize the HFY Queen's control over their drones without causing harm to individual HFY." ZYX-era stepped forward, her hand hovering over the biomechanical interface. The system pulsed with energy, responding to her thoughts. "I can sense the field's potential," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's like a gentle wave that breaks the psychic chains binding the drones to their queens." King's mind whirred with possibilities. "This changes everything. We can liberate entire sectors of HFY space without massive casualties." He quickly relayed the information to Admiral Hayes and Chancellor Cragg. Within minutes, the Alliance's battle strategy was being overhauled to incorporate this new technology. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. King coordinated with Captain Cortez of the USS Avalon and Captain Khan to organize the Alliance fleet. Multiple disruption field generators were hastily constructed, drawing on the combined expertise of human, Klingon, and progenitor engineers. As the final preparations were made, King addressed the assembled crews via ship-wide communication. "This is our moment," he said, his voice carrying across the Alliance fleet. "We have the chance to end this war and forge a new future for our galaxy. Every one of you has a crucial role to play. Trust in your training, in your allies, and in the strength of our unity." With a final nod to his bridge crew, King gave the order. "All ships, engage warp drive. Operation Liberation is go." The Alliance fleet surged forward, a dazzling array of ships from multiple species working in perfect harmony. They pushed deep into Hruk territory, their advance aided by the element of surprise and the ongoing chaos within the Hruk Empire. King watched from the bridge of the Excalibur as the first wave of attacks unfolded. Alliance ships established beachheads near major Hruk production centers, swiftly deploying the disruption field generators. As the devices activated, entire sectors of space erupted into pandemonium. Millions of Hruk drones suddenly found themselves free from the Queen's control. The reaction varied wildly. Some Hruk turned on their former masters. Others fled in confusion, while some simply stood down, awaiting further instructions. Captain Cortez's voice crackled over the comm. "Excalibur, this is Avalon. We're detecting massive fluctuations in Hruk communication networks. The disruption fields are working better than we'd hoped." King nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Excellent work, Elena. Now for Phase 2. All strike teams, prepare for precision attacks on Hruk command structures." The Excalibur led a series of lightning raids against key Hruk installations. Using intelligence gathered by cloaked Klingon ships and the progenitor station's long-range sensors, they targeted and destroyed vital communication nodes, further isolating Hruk queens from their rapidly dwindling forces. As the battle raged on, Zuexera's voice suddenly cut through the chaos. "Captain King, we've made another breakthrough." King listened intently as Zuexera explained their latest discovery, a method to broadcast a modified version of the disruption field through subspace, exponentially increasing its range and impact. "Do it," King ordered without hesitation. "Extend the field as far as you can." Within moments, the effects of this new development became apparent. Hruk systems far beyond the reach of the Alliance's physical forces began to falter and fragment. The Queen's control was crumbling faster than anyone had dared to hope. Suddenly, alarms blared across the Excalibur's bridge. Massive energy surge detected in the heart of Hruk space. Lieutenant Commander Ramirez reported, her fingers flying over her console. "It matches the signature we detected earlier. They're activating some kind of doomsday device." King's mind raced. This had to be the Queen's last-ditch effort to reassert control. "All ships, brace for impact," he called out. "Zuexera, can you counter it?" There was a moment of tense silence. Then Zuexera's voice came through, strained but determined. "I'm channeling the full power of the progenitor station. Projecting counterwave. Now." The Hruk psychic attack slammed into the Alliance fleet like a tsunami of raw energy. Ships rocked violently, their crews fighting to maintain control. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the Queens might succeed in re-establishing their dominance. But then, like a clearing storm, the psychic pressure began to subside. Zuexera's counterwave, amplified by the progenitor technology, pushed back against the Hruk assault. The doomsday device's energy dissipated, its effects nullified. As the dust settled, the true impact of the failed attack became clear. Millions more Hruk drones, their connections to the Queens permanently severed, were now free to choose their own path. King watched in amazement as entire fleets of Hruk ships began to turn against their former masters. The tide of battle had shifted decisively in the Alliance's favor. "This is it," King said, his voice filled with fierce dedication. "Admiral Hayes, Chancellor Cragg, it's time for the final push. We're taking the fight to the Hruk homeworld." As the Alliance fleet regrouped and prepared for the assault on the heart of Hruk space, King couldn't help but feel a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. They were on the verge of a victory that would reshape the galaxy, but the hardest part of their journey still lay ahead. The Hruk homeworld loomed before them, a last bastion of resistance in a crumbling empire. King knew that the Queens would fight with every ounce of their considerable strength to defend their seat of power. The coming battle would test the Alliance to its very limits. As the Excalibur took its place at the forefront of the assault force, King steeled himself for the challenges ahead. Whatever the Hruk threw at them, he was confident that the combined strength of humans, Klingon, and progenitors would prevail. The future of the galaxy hung in the balance, and they would not falter now. The Excalibur surged forward, leading the charge towards the Hruk homeworld. King's grip tightened on his command chair as the planet loomed larger on the monitor, its surface a swirling mass of bioorganic structures and fortifications. "All ships, prepare for atmospheric entry," King ordered, his voice steady despite the tension coursing through him. "Remember your training and trust in each other. We end this war today." As the Alliance fleet pierced the upper atmosphere, Hruk defenses erupted in a dazzling display of firepower. Energy beams and bioplasma projectiles crisscrossed the sky, creating a deadly web of destruction. "Evasive maneuvers," King called out. The Excalibur banked hard, narrowly avoiding a massive tendril of energy that lashed out from the surface. Lieutenant Commander Ramirez's fingers danced across her tactical console. Shields holding at 87%, so the Klingon battle cruisers are drawing most of their fire. King nodded grimly. "Good. Have the Avalon and her battle group commence their attack run. We need to keep the Hruk forces occupied while our ground team deploys." On the main viewer, King watched as Captain Cortez's ships engaged the primary Hruk defensive clusters. The distraction worked perfectly, creating a narrow window of opportunity for the infiltration team. "Ground team, you're clear for deployment," King announced over the secure channel. "May honor and glory be yours this day." As the specially modified shuttlecraft carrying King's elite team streaked towards the surface, the battle above reached its crescendo. The Excalibur rocked as a glancing blow struck its port shields. "Sir, we're detecting a massive energy buildup at the planet's core," Ramirez reported, her eyes wide with concern. "It looks like they're preparing some kind of last-ditch weapon." King's mind raced. They needed to end this quickly before the Hruk could unleash whatever doomsday device they had hidden away. He opened a channel to ZYXERA back on the progenitor station. "ZYXERA, we need your help. Can you establish a psychic link with our ground team?" There was a moment of static before her voice came through, clear and determined. "I'm already on it, Captain. I can sense their presence. They've made it past the outer defenses and are approaching the underground bunker." King let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Guide them, ZYXERA. You're their eyes and ears down there." As the space battle raged on, King's attention was split between coordinating the fleet's movements and monitoring the ground team's progress through ZYXERA's updates. The team fought their way through layers of Hruk defenses, facing genetically enhanced warrior drones and automated security systems. "They've reached a major junction," ZYXERA reported, her voice strained with concentration. "I sense a powerful presence ahead, a guardian bred specifically to protect the Queens." King's fist clenched. This was the moment that would determine the fate of the mission and possibly the entire galaxy. "Tell them to work together," he urged. "Remind them that their strength lies in their diversity." Through ZYXERA's psychic link, King could almost see the battle unfolding. The Klingon warrior, Lieutenant Koroth, charged forward with a battle cry, drawing the Guardian's attention. As the massive creature lashed out with its biomechanical limbs, Ensign Chun, the human sniper, took carefully aimed shots at its weak points. The Guardian roared in pain and fury, but the combined assault wasn't enough to bring it down. That's when Zal, the progenitor tech expert, stepped in. Wielding an advanced energy weapon of his own design, Zal unleashed a barrage of precisely calibrated energy pulses that disrupted the Guardian's neural pathways. With a final, earth-shaking bellow, the Guardian collapsed. The path to the Queen's sanctum lay open. "They've done it!" Ziwaxera exclaimed. "They're entering the central chamber now." King allowed himself a moment of hope, but he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The Queens would not go down without a fight, and there was still the matter of the energy buildup at the planet's core. "Sir," Ramirez called out, her voice urgent. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever they're planning, it's big enough to take out the entire planet, maybe even the surrounding system." King's teeth gritted in tenacity. Ziwaxera warned the team. They need to neutralize the Queens and disable that weapon immediately. As the infiltration team engaged the Hruk Queens in their inner sanctum, the space battle reached a fever pitch. The Excalibur shuddered under a barrage of enemy fire, its shields flickering dangerously. "Shields down to 23%, Ramirez reported. "We can't take much more of this." King opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Captain King. Concentrate all fire on the main Hruk command structure. We need to buy our ground team more time." The Alliance ships responded with a thunderous volley of weapons fire. Phasers, disruptors, and torpedoes rained down on the Hruk defenses, creating a spectacular light show visible even from orbit. Suddenly, Zuexera's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, I sense an opportunity. The Queens, their concentration is wavering. If I can project my consciousness into the chamber, I might be able to distract them long enough for our team to gain the upper hand." King hesitated for a split second, knowing the risk such an action posed to Ziwaxera. But they were out of options. "Do it," he said firmly. As Ziwaxera focused all her psychic energy on the distant chamber, King could only wait and hope. The fate of humanity and all alien species hung in the balance, with victory or annihilation separated by the thinnest of margins. The seconds ticked by like hours. The Excalibur's shields failed completely, leaving the ship exposed to the full fury of the Hruk assault. Just as King prepared to order a desperate maneuver, Zuaxera's voice rang out once more. "They've done it! The Queens are down and the weapon is disabled." A cheer erupted across the bridge, quickly echoed throughout the Allied fleet as the news spread. The Hruk forces, suddenly cut off from their Queen's control, fell into disarray. Ship after ship powered down or changed course, no longer presenting a cohesive threat. As the dust settled and the reality of their victory began to sink in, King allowed himself a moment of reflection. They had achieved the impossible, bringing an end to a war that had threatened to consume the entire galaxy. But he knew that the real work was just beginning. "Open a channel to Admiral Hayes and Chancellor Cragg," King ordered, his voice filled with quiet grit. "We need to discuss our next steps. The Hruk Empire has fallen, but now we have millions of liberated drones to consider. This is our chance to build a lasting peace. We can't afford to waste it." As the call connected and the faces of his fellow leaders appeared on screen, King straightened his uniform. The war might be over, but the challenge of forging a new future for all species in the galaxy lay ahead. It would require all of their wisdom, compassion, and purpose to succeed. With a deep breath, King began to outline his vision for the days to come, knowing that every decision they made now would shape the course of history for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.